Good afternoon, everyone. I'd just like to welcome you to the Standing Committee on Education and Economic Growth. Today is Tuesday, June 15th at 1:30. Just like to welcome all of our members. We have Trish Altas, Heath MacDonald, Gordon McNeely. We have Stephen Howard, and subbing in for Minister Hudson, we have Corey Deagle. Can I get a motion to adopt the agenda? Heath MacDonald. All right, so first of all, we have two presentations here this afternoon. Our first presentation, we're going to be getting a briefing on the labor shortages from the Construction Association of PEI and also Holland College. So first, we have from the Construction Association of PEI, we have the President Craig Ling and the General Manager Sam Sanderson. We thank you both very much for taking some time during a busier time, especially with the summer season upon us here on PEI. I'm just going to get you, and you have a presentation planned. If I can, I'll just get you to introduce yourselves as well for Hansard, and then if you want to start on your presentation, that would be great. And we'll reserve questions at the end, if that's all right with you. Perfect. Awesome.
First off, I'd like to say thank you very much, Mr. Chair, for the opportunity to come in and present to the committee this afternoon. And as we all know, construction is very important to each and every one of us from tip to tip. My name is Sam Sanderson. I am the General Manager at the Construction Association of Prince Edward Island, and very proud to be there just a little over 6 years.
Okay.
My name is Craig Ling. I'm the President of Construction Association of PEI. Happy to be here today too. So.
Okay, perfect. So yeah, if you're ready, we'll just start things right off, Sam or Craig, whoever's going to be doing the presentation.
As you can see, I prepared a little slideshow today. The Construction Association of PEI is very busy. Things are happening. Our motto today is building PEI one day at a time. COVID impacts industry. March 2020, COVID shuts down most services and industry on PEI. Many sites shut down as owners regroup and prepare to restart 7 to 10 days after shutdown. Construction is deemed essential services and industry restarts. Workers were reluctant to return to work due to CERB and lenient EI services. Industry also discovered that we were facing a much lower output of work as the pandemic increased. New entrance into the industry was almost non-existent for some time. Delays with trade school curriculum and the availability to teach, certify, and obtain blocks for our apprentices became a challenge. The overall mental health and safety of the individual became more apparent as more restrictions came into play as tighter restrictions and protocols. Industry ran into issues with our traveling workforce that were either traveling to projects here in PEI or traveling outside of PEI. Due to COVID, many were very reluctant to leave their provinces, cities, or towns. Industry discovered CERB and relaxed EI made return to work for some a big challenge to compete with these programs. Industry faces many challenges ahead as we strive to meet the demands for all sectors of construction, from housing, infrastructure, and commercial communities in our island to grow as we steadily see rises in population on national and international platforms. The Construction Association of PEI is a leader when it comes to addressing industry issues such as labor shortages, safety, training. CAPEI's mission is to advocate, promote, and advance the interest and efficiency of the construction industry in Prince Edward Island by acting on behalf of its 220 plus members. I will update that we're up over 250 now, so we're growing every day. Some of the things that we provide: career development programs and construction training for youth, newcomers, and women, safety training, confined space, fall arrest, elevated work platform, CPR, first aid, and WMIS, educational programs and seminars on construction-related matters, as well as Gold Seal training, virtual access to plans and specifications, documentation, printing and scanning, CCDC and CCA standard construction documents and seals, human resources support, networking events, advocacy, integrated membership to the Canadian Construction Association. PEI's construction industry. PEI is leading in economic growth, population growth, and construction growth. PEI currently is seeing a huge and continuous increased demand of all types of housing, which has been a major driver for construction in PEI, along with the need for updated public facilities such as schools, hospitals, and recreational facilities. PEI is also set to host the Canada Winter Games in 2023, and 2020 was surprisingly PEI's busiest construction year to date. Despite setbacks due to the COVID pandemic, just as an example, the IC&I sector seen a growth of 30.9% over 2019. Estimated construction added $840 million into the economy of PEI in 2020. With such a boom in construction and an aging workforce, where 1,500 workers are set to retire or exit the labor pool by 2029, with already 600 plus job openings in PEI's construction industry, it creates a ton of opportunity for individuals to get into a meaningful, lucrative, powerful, and exciting career. Skilled newcomers in construction, Discover Carpentry, Youth in Trades. These are our career development programs. Each program is a little different but share a similar structure. Each program has a classroom component and a work placement component spanning several months. Each program has a focus on teaching and placing participants into a job with an essential set of skills to succeed. Career development program criteria: review of trades tools, materials, supplies for various construction trades, certification in fall protection, CSTS, worksite safety orientation, CPR, and first aid and women's. Orientation days: spend a day with an employer. Review of our island work culture for construction trades and professionals. Apprenticeship process for Red Seal certification in Canada. Resume development, interview skills, hidden job market, goal setting, Canadian credential process, problem solving, exercises, team building, communication skills, trades math, work boots, and personal protective equipment, plus 240 hours of apprenticeship hours earned during the program. Our new construction training center. We've recently announced our construction training center that will enable our various trades programs to get a more hands-on approach with tools and getting real experiences in multiple different trades. We have also partnered with Habitat for Humanity, Blooming House, and the QEH Foundation, to name a few, to work together to create project-based daily training and support for their work and support our communities. Education. Working closely with the PEI Schools Board to get the industry's voice into middle schools and high schools, and reassure students that there is a good path for them in construction. Working with our friends at Holland College to open up new pathways into the construction industry and help students transition into careers. Virtual reality. We have recently purchased virtual reality training kits and are beginning to roll out this experience in our various trades programs and at schools across Prince Edward Island in collaboration with the Public Schools Board. We are leading the way as the first construction association in Canada with this service. We formed the partnership to bring to life and immerse an educational hands-on construction experience. It is a platform that allows us to bring welding, electrical work, even heavy machinery into a classroom, workspace, or training center. The VR systems currently consist of 12 modules, those ranging from construction welding to robotics to heavy equipment operator. You can get as close as you can get to an actual job site without leaving the classroom. With 10 new modules coming by December of this year, those being in carpentry and agriculture, we will have something for everyone who wants to experience the trades. Our very brand new Trades Can, Helping Build Canada, is a new platform. We've partnered with 2 local PEI firms to develop a revolutionary recruitment platform that will strengthen the local workforce and help kickstart the economy. Trades Can is our response to labor market needs and is a service that we will provide free of charge to our 250 plus members. In collaboration with Sunrise Group, Trades Can will be part of our solution to a depleting workforce in the industry, working with trades colleges and clients in countries who have comparable construction types and training. We will will make for a smooth transition into island work. This partnership opens up many possibilities with our services such as VR programs, set up in-home language, still programmed to Canadian trade modules, along with our training programs and the study abroad school with Sunrise Group. That kind of brings an end to our visual presentation. As you can see, there's a lot of things happening at the association. We're thinking outside that box and creating new and exciting opportunities. We've reached out and trying to help youth today look at the possibility of the trades through VR. We're putting tools in their hands that they're familiar with, that they're used to using. We've created a great partnership with Department of Education to date in a very short period of time. There's lots of really amazing collaboration planned for the future. Some really great discussions with our friends at Holland College to see where we can go, and working with our members. I don't believe we have a member in the association that can grow their company or even get their work that they have on hand completed on time and on budget with the resources that they have. So it's really impacting us all. We look at housing as an example. We have a huge shortfall of different types of housing, social housing and affordable housing. We can't build it any faster. We need more people to build. So, every avenue we're looking at is certainly going to have an impact. Is it going to solve the problem? No. Collaboration, partnerships, and working together will help us overcome it, but it's going to take time. So as an industry association, we're here to advocate and spread the word that, we're trying everything we possibly can and collaborating with everybody we can to create, opportunities. Looking at net zero, climate change, and energy efficiency is becoming a very big part of construction. We're looking at building bigger, better, smarter buildings. It's industry that's going to be building these. We're looking at drones right now on construction sites. We're looking at robotics. We're looking at new innovative materials and procedures. So right now, really, the sky's the limit, at the possibilities. But we need to come together and let our youth know that these real possibilities are out there, no matter what their educational value may be. I'm very, very eager to say to tell my own story. I've got a grade 10 education. By working hard and putting your best foot forward is one of your better paths, and having that opportunity to move forward is tremendously valuable. I look at our new construction training center, and that's been a dream of mine for a few years. Let's put real tools in real people's hands, help them become more employable. We're not offering any credentials at the moment, but you know what? Let's get them out to work. Let's create that opportunity for them. So that's something that we're striving to do. Our first two programs that have gone through that facility to date, we're looking at 97% employment. These, 90% of the participants that's gone through the two programs are actively employed in the industry. So let's continue that and create that opportunity. So, that's kind of, a lot going on in a nutshell, and I'm sure there's lots of questions and, open dialogue, and I'm not, let's have that conversation.
Well, thank you very much, Sam. Is there anything that you would want to add, Craig?
No,
Okay.
I'm good.
Perfect. So we will open it up to questions. Stephen?
I'm very excited to hear about the virtual reality that you're adding to this. It's exciting that we're the first. And I was just wondering, where will those 12 systems you mentioned be? Are those going to be in high schools, rotating around, or are they going to be in one place that the students go to?
So we currently have the units ourselves, and we will be taking them to the school systems. So currently, right now, we were at our first school that we went to was Bluefield, and we were very lucky to have Heath join us out there that day, and it was quite an experience. And we had originally planned on being there for one afternoon, and we actually ended up being there for 5 afternoons, working with kids who were interested in the trades, and there was a few that had never even approached the trade platform before, but we're very interested, and we're going to look at future options within the trade. So we've built we now have a mobile trailer. It's our training and events trailer. We will be coming to a school near you very, very soon. 2 weeks ago, we had the opportunity to do a presentation to all of the junior high principals, and the following day, all the senior high principals, and that went over very, very well. And you know, the inquiries are already starting to come in as, you know, how do we get involved? When would you like to come visit us? You know, how do we set something up? We're working with Jeff Clow, principal at Tosh, starting in September, to create some great things with their trades programs and that. So, you know, the availability is out there. You know, we're going to, you know, have our mobile unit to come to, you know, every school in PEI if the opportunity is there.
Stephen?
Thank you. Yeah, I think you hit on the next thing I was going to talk about. Just the excitement of using a VR system might introduce the trades to people that may not have considered it before, and it sounds like you've already experienced that with your first pilot that you've had here. If this goes well, would you be expanding this with more mobile units, or maybe would these end up in every school permanently?
Well, you know what, we're always looking for ways to expand and create opportunity. You know, if it warrants it, I would certainly be interested in purchasing more, and you know, then we'd have to look at some staff to you know, to be able to you know, fully fulfill the needs of the educational system. There's potentially a way to, you know, get them into the schools as well on a permanent basis, depending on what the needs are. I know as an industry association, as an industry, we are certainly open to all ideas. We're very lucky here right now. The company that we partnered with, a company out of Toronto, on the VR side of things, the developer actually moved to PEI about 5 weeks ago. He actually is residing in Summerside, and he's going to be working with us quite exclusively to develop new programs, and we're in the partnership that we have to work with, you know, thinking outside that box, maybe looking at micro-credentials and the availability to utilize the VR on a more professional scale with, you know, through the apprenticeship programs and different avenues. So,
Stephen?
Chair, so you've led into my next question once again. So are these VR systems delivering like just a program that the kids can, or the students can operate a heavy machinery vehicle, or is it also accessing resources that might be outside of our borders, even on the other side of the world? Is that part of what's going on here, or is it just like a set program that's...
So the programs to date that we have are introductory programs into, you know, one of them is an excavator operator. You know, you're setting in the seat and you're actually moving the machine to a pile of rock, and you actually load it. They have a dump truck backs in and you're in control of it all. You load the dump truck and the dump truck pulls away, and depending on the amount of time you want to be on the program. You know, to date we've limited to kind of 20 minutes per student so that everybody could get a feel of it. You know, there is longer, you could stay on the program longer and load 10 trucks and things like that. The electrical side of it, you're actually physically, you know, replacing a switch, you're testing the currents and reading a manual as you go along to make sure you're doing it properly. It tells you whether you've made an error or whatever and stuff. So they're very interactive. And we're hoping to potentially grow in that, you know, as we go along. There could be some certification process down the road. I know, you know, it's going to be a lot of work ahead, but potentially working with our trades colleges to create those platforms for more of a micro-credential and interactive, you know, maybe working 30 hours on a job site, and 4 hours a week or 6 hours a week you're doing something virtually to help with your accreditations and things like that. So there's all kinds of opportunity and availability with this type of equipment.
Perfect. Thank you, Stephen. Gord?
Yeah, thanks for coming in. This is great, and I appreciate your presentation. You started off the presentation by talking about the EI system and how COVID has affected, you know, there's been CERB, there's been EI. It was, the numbers I think you came out with, the 1,500, you're recruiting for 1,500 people retiring, 600 vacancies. How are you doing now with the transition? Like, are people, are the numbers where you need them to be as we kind of move hopefully out of COVID?
Not even close. Not even close. That 1,500 vacancies, that's based on Bill Force Canada report that was released in March of 2021. Those are just retirees alone, not counting anybody impacted with COVID or because of COVID. It's just retirement numbers alone. I believe some numbers that I've thrown out there early on in COVID, in September of 2020, we had close to 800 jobs available, and we had 7,900 people in PEI collecting CERB. So we have a huge demand every day. We have our own job portal, islandbuilder.ca, that at any given time there's over 600 jobs, 700 jobs on there that we know of, not counting what may be available to non-members and things like that. So it's the return to work is really just getting some back that took an extended leave because of COVID, but we're not increasing numbers in any way, shape, and form.
Gord?
So yeah, that's concerning, and I mean, and then you went on to talk about bringing people in from the outside or from different provinces, which became incredibly more difficult. How did that put stress on having to get people in and people not working in Prince Edward Island? How did these jobs continue?
Everybody did the best they could. Your schedules were delayed. Your completion dates were extended because of inavailability to bring certain trades or specialized trades into the province. Lack of workforce. I know there was a couple of members very early on in the start of the pandemic had shut down their sites for a week to revamp and help bring their sites up to more hygienic site and cleaner, safer, and that. And less than 50% of their staff returned because they had received that payment of the CERB for the month. No, I got paid for the month. I'm going to stay home. I'll come back to work in a month's time, or whatever the case may be. One of our larger members was very heavily impacted, and it had a huge strain on his availability to get that project or multiple projects completed.
Gord?
And this kind of timeline scenario would affect. Just listening to you gets me stressed out. I'm just trying to picture myself if I was the director of that project or trying to get that done. How's the stress levels going through all this? Or how's the mental health of your members in your association?
Mental health is actually a discussion that has transpired recently. We're seeing it with our workforce, we've seen it very early on that people were very unsure whether they should go to work because they didn't want to bring it home. I know myself sitting in my office, at the early part of COVID, I was getting calls that I never ever expected that I would ever be getting, and on one call, I was basically threatened. You have to shut down construction. I can't be going to work. I'm going to bring COVID home to my family and all this. The same breath, 20 minutes later, you were answering the phone and saying there was a person on the other end saying, oh my God, thank you so much for keeping construction alive. We can't live on 50% of our salary. So there was all those things happening, and that was a daily basis. And stress and people being scared creates a lot of emotion. Some good and some bad, unfortunately. So that impacted the work site. People weren't as productive. People were unsure, whether they're going to work today, if they're going to have a job tomorrow, or what was going to happen. So they weren't so eager to go to work. They weren't as productive as they once were pre-COVID. And it's taking some time to get that back. Employers now are more aware of the mental health. They want to spend more time focusing to make sure that employee is feeling safe, that they're happy to come to work, and that they're in a safe environment. So there's a lot more focus today than there ever was before on the mental health of their workers. I wish I could say it was perfect, but that's not unrealistic statement. But everybody seems to be working very hard to create a safer environment, a better environment, and a productive environment.
Gord?
So there's the pressures that you just mentioned too, and you look at what's been going on lately. with the rise of prices, the rise of material, it's enormous. So you have the rise of material causing stress too. You've got construction people that have bid for a job, won the job, and then the price of material goes out of the world. What happens in that situation where you've signed a contract and then material has gone and you can't provide the service for the same thing?
Yeah, there's some discussion happening around that, and you know, most of our owners have been pretty good. You know, we've been focusing on, you know, the tendering process and saying, you know what, you need to award these much faster. You know, we're starting to see, you know, the province is our biggest owner. We're starting to see them looking at the possibility and working towards a 7 to a 14-day award. You know, the 30-day plus awards are no longer, what word am I looking for here? No longer available because you know, most suppliers are guaranteeing their prices from 3 to 5 to 7 to 10 days. So we need, as an industry, we need those awards faster to be able to order that material to support the price. You know, COVID in itself, you know, just the cost impact of COVID was probably somewhere between 11 to 17%. Across the board with, you know, hand sanitizer and things like that. I never thought I would be selling $10,000 worth of hand sanitizer in the first 60 days of COVID to try and provide that, you know, for our industry to keep working. You know, so all of a sudden, you know, better site cleanliness, you know, more washing facilities, cleaner washing facilities, you know, all that adds costs that really wasn't there before. It's now part of the new norm, so that's being built into the overall price. But labor is a huge, you know, those costs are increasing all the time. We're seeing and hearing where, you know, there's a lot of negotiations happening in the Tim Hortons parking lot. You know, a coffee break, you know, come to work for me, I'll give you $3 an hour more, or whatever the case may be. And you know, guys coming back at lunchtime and grabbing their tool bag and saying, you know what, I'm going with you know, ABC Construction because he offered me more money. So employers are really looking for a more creative way to retain their employees, you know, benefits and things like that. Healthcare, RSPs are more important now than ever before. A good wage. You know, we're starting to see wages increase. Certainly never going to be able to meet Alberta, Ontario's wages, but they're increasing as the demand increases. So, you know, there's lots of good things happening in construction. We're looking at smarter ways. You know, it's not the back-breaking trade it used to be. We're looking, you know, smarter, better procedures, smarter equipment, and better ways of doing things.
And Gord, we do have some other members, so maybe one more question, and then we can come back if that's all right.
Sure. I've got a lot, but I mean, it's a great discussion. I think it's fascinating. There's so many questions, but what I've been talking to some people about is that material is so scarce right now that people are going in and almost hoarding material for their own, because they're scared they're not going to get it. Like, are you seeing much of that? Is that going to be a major problem in Prince Edward Island?
It certainly has an impact, and you know, to say it's not happening, I would probably be lying to you. We go back to early on in COVID, that toilet paper syndrome. You know, everybody's rushing out to get what they can because they know they're going to need it. When the next truckload of drywall or the next truckload of plywood is going to be available, you know, who knows? So if I have the availability to buy it now, I'm going to buy it because I know I have, you know, a major construction job coming up. You know, many contractors are booked into 2023 right now, so they know they're going to use it. And you know, there certainly are some suppliers that are rationing a little bit and things like that. That is happening. So.
And Trish?
Thank you, Chair. Sam, you spoke quite a bit about, you know, wanting to encourage new people to get involved in the industry and perhaps, you know, opening up to those who might not have thought of getting involved in construction as a career. The last statistic I had heard was that women make up about 7% of the construction industry workforce. So I'm wondering if you can share a bit about what, you know, if there are some barriers that, you know, have been identified to your knowledge that are preventing women from wanting to get involved in this line of work, and what some of the efforts might be happening to change that.
Yeah, no, for sure. So as an association, we certainly are trying to put our best foot forward. We started a Women in Construction Committee just pre-COVID, and we're getting that fired back up here in the very near future. We've just a couple of months ago hired a young lady to work with us who is a tradesperson to help us work and encourage and entice more women to get into the trades. We're reaching out to all the various organizations to try and encourage collaboration and partnership. We built our new training center, right at the Royalty Center. So we have a couple of groups there that are very close that we certainly hope and encourage the opportunity to work with them, to work with more women. Getting into the school systems are certainly going to be a tremendous avenue to open the opportunity for more young girls to get into the trades and look at that. We've been working with East Prince Women's Information Center to try and encourage some of the women in their program to look at trades and open those doors. So, and employers are really looking at it as well. It's one of those things that it's certainly. Industry associations certainly need to be the leaders in this, because membership and industry looks at those associations for guidance and champions to help us excel. We're working with many different organizations. I just had the recent opportunity to meet with the Black cultural community, and CJ and I are working together to create some potential programming and opportunity there. So like I say, we're working with every organization we can to create awareness. We've been doing some work with the Mi'kmaq Confederacy and the Native Council of PEI, looking at every avenue. And as an industry, our motto is, it doesn't make any difference who you are, where you come from, or anything. If you have an interest to get into the trades, we want you. We want to sit down with you and open that window for you, open that door to see what we can do to get you encouraged into the industry.
Trish?
Thank you. And so that's really great to hear. It sounds like there's been a lot of efforts to sort of build those relationships with different communities and open those discussions. I wonder if you've considered doing any sort of like a survey or something to perhaps, for example, with those who are accessing programs at the East Prince Women's Employment Center, just broadly to see what their thoughts are on construction and what kind of, because I'm looking at that barrier piece, right? Because there are things, whether it's perception or just could be things like childcare, for example, maybe. What are the things that are preventing women from wanting to go into this line of work, and that could be a good way to find out.
I would absolutely love to create some more opportunity and gather more information. I know various times I've had some of my members reach out to me. How do we connect with more women? I've got a lot of positions available here, and we're prepared to hire 2 people to get the job done if one staggered shifts, to help with daycare and childcare situations and stuff. Collaboration is really the key, and putting people together is I think is really the key in helping that industry and the potential participants that are interested in careers. Let's sit down and see what we can do. If we sat down in the same room and worked together, you know what, we're going to come out with a very positive environment that's going to work well for everybody. There's going to be give and take. Employers are looking for more and better and bigger opportunities to engage with every type of workforce, whether it be women, the Black community, Native community, or newcomer community. So and the youth as well. So.
Trish?
Yeah, definitely. And in terms of recruiting newcomers as well. So you mentioned a little bit about this Sunrise School, which was new to me. I haven't heard of that before. So is the idea that you would be able to recruit people internationally to come and work on PEI, or
Yes, it is. It's to work with some of the existing platforms like the Atlantic Pilot Program and things like that to help people who may be interested. We have lots of employers who are interested in going through that process. And that stream, how do we be a person that can help encourage people and look at trades skill sets in their home countries to be more adaptable and more better fits for our members and industry here.
Trish?
And so this might be a bit of a chicken and an egg question, but as we're, bringing in workers, from other countries to come to PEI to work, we have to think about housing as well, right?
Yeah,
So,
no, for sure,
and of course, construction industry is building the housing. So, I'm sure that's something you've considered as well. If you could just elaborate on those concerns right now. Or
Yeah, and the housing concern is really a concern for everybody, and depending on the volume of people that come in, whether they're there's temporary housing put into place. We look at other jurisdictions across the country. Look at the West for an example. They build work camps, and things like that. Is there an opportunity if there was a huge influx of people, that as far as workers go, we're not really looking for temporary foreign workers, or we haven't to date. We're looking for people that are interested in coming to be residents of PEI. We want them to buy a house. We want them to, create a new life here with their families. That's what have been focusing on to date. So, the temporary housing, maybe it's, set something up in the short term until they get here, get established, and potentially buy a home to bring their families over or something. There's a lot of discussion still has to happen around that. We need workers to build housing for our current residents of PEI. So, if we could get, those 7,900 who were unserved last September to come to work, that would have a huge impact on our availability to build housing.
And Trish, I might get one more question, and then we'll come back if you have more questions.
Sure, yeah. No, and I can definitely appreciate that, the conditions with COVID and different programs would have had an impact on the workforce for sure. I think it, I do think we have to be careful with sort of equating that number to a number of people that could have worked in the industry but I do hear what you're saying. One of the other things I wanted to ask about was around human resources support that you mentioned that the association provides. So does that look different for unionized construction companies versus non-unionized?
We are an industry association. We don't get involved in union hiring and union negotiations and stuff. So we will pass on a name to an employer. If they are union, they will have to go down that path with their union representative. So.
Just one more quick question.
Yeah.
So the HR support center, people might contact you for employment opportunities, and then you pass on those names.
Exactly.
Okay.
So the HR, we do have an HR person on staff, and thankfully it's a funded position by the province through Skills PEI, and we're eternally grateful for. His role is as an advisor. So he maintains our Island Builder site, our social media and stuff. So when he receives an application, so he may have 10 companies that are looking for a carpenter, for an example. He will send that resume out to the 10 companies that are looking. From there, they will take over on the HR side of things.
Thank you. Heath?
Thanks. Thanks for the presentation, Sam. I think with all the questions you've got a lot of your bases covered, but I just wanted a couple, retention rate in the industry. Do you have any figures on that at all as far as?
I don't have any hard numbers, Heath. For those that have been in the industry, they're staying in it quite a while. We're seeing 30 and 40-year veterans within the industry that are getting ready to retire. There's so much opportunity today to become a skilled tradesperson, and then from there move into the entrepreneurship, become your own boss, your own business owner, and then potentially be a developer or a supplier or all of the above. So once that skill set is in place, it opens up so many doors to further your professional career in many different avenues.
Heath?
Do you have a handle? I know this is relatively new, helping build Canada, but are there any impediments that you're seeing already with the immigration factor coming to play in working with this partnership, or has this actually started yet?
This has actually started, so we're working with a few members right now. You know, like any program, you know, longevity is certainly a bit of a factor. You know, we have lots of jobs now that we can put them into. You know, the process is like any process could, if there was an opportunity for it to be a little bit shorter, would always help. But to date, I'm not hearing of any major impacts currently.
Heath?
And just for other members, I did have the opportunity, as Sam stated at the beginning, to test out the VR equipment and watch the students, and I can tell you, reaching out to that age bracket at that time, female, male, what have you, as far as seeing an interest in what they were doing was pretty phenomenal, and hopefully you can get to all the schools, because I think it's pretty unique for them to see it. And I got to drive a Hi-Mac for the first time. Sam said I did pretty good, so. Anyway, I don't have anything else, Sam. I think you guys are, from what I've seen, even when I was in government, you guys have really outpaced some of the expectations, I think, of your industry, and continue to do a good job. So good for you guys. That's it. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Heath.
It doesn't have to be in order.
Yeah, for sure, yeah.
It'll be quick.
Go ahead.
So, we've heard all of these great things today about what the Construction Association is doing. Do you have anything you'd like to share about what more the province might do to help address the issue around lack of workers and supporting people to get into construction?
Right. Well, thank you for that question, Trish. You know, as we all know, there's always more that can be done. I go back to my training, or our training center, which and thankfully again was funded by the province and ACOA jointly. That center has the opportunity to create tremendous opportunity for individuals that are interested in construction. It has the opportunity to start a career in a little different format. You know, we're going to see our great friends at Holland College come in after us and talk about the great things that they're doing. But there is another pathway to the trades. Not everybody is destined to go to post-secondary. Not everybody has the opportunity. When you have the opportunity to learn a skill set that creates employment, is huge. It gets people to work. From there, you know, they have the opportunity to further their education, whether they would like to go through the apprenticeship program or challenge the Red Seal exams at a later date, or, you know, life gets in the way. They have to get to work, and you know, whether it be for housing or they've got, you know, family or whatever it may be. Having a facility where you could have constant intakes would be absolutely huge. So under our current funding stream, we're funded through Skills PEI and ESDC for our programming. You know, and we're reliant, we don't always know if we're going to get the programming or not, and to have a facility setting idle is really detrimental, and when you've got jobs out there, and, you know, right now if I had 30 more people to put through that program, you know, or a part of that program, I can almost guarantee you that they will be employed to some magnitude. So, you know, for me right now, having people to go through that program, working with other groups and stuff, is tremendously valuable. Having the funding to do it is absolutely huge. And we're a not-for-profit ourselves. We've got lots of growth, but, you know, is it something we can fund ourselves? No. You know, we were very lucky, and a few of the folks sitting on the committee here today were at an event a few weeks ago at our facility and stuff, and it's a great venue. It's a great opportunity to learn, and it's hands-on learning. You know, you go back. Some of our participants, or many of our participants, said they wouldn't have excelled in the program if they hadn't had that hands-on opportunity to build a Beds for Blooming house, or build a building, or work with Habitat, or work with on the many projects that we have. They wouldn't have been so comfortable going out into the workforce. We had a young lady, actually two young ladies that went through our last program. They actually are changing their career focus getting into carpentry because they now feel comfortable using a chop saw and a table saw and a drill and stuff. They're that much more confident going out into the workforce. So those things in itself are absolutely huge. So.
Gord.
Can I add something quickly at the end of that? It's not a question, it's just a quick comment, I promise.
All right.
So just wanted to say that event, the hammering competition was something I didn't put my hand up for in our caucus because I don't have those skills, but maybe if I had the opportunity to try the virtual, I would have been more brave to try it.
Exactly, exactly.
Gord. Thanks, Trish.
Just a couple questions. Earlier this year, the association raised the potential for introducing licensing requirements for contractors to ensure customers receive quality work. Has there been any progress on that idea?
So we did submit a letter to Minister Thompson requesting that the province have a look at it. Actually received an email just as I was pulling up today, and unfortunately I haven't had a chance to look at the response, but I will certainly send the response to the committee so that they have an answer to the question right away.
Thank you. Gord?
And I noticed last summer, Holland College suspended 5 programs. One of them was cabinet making and wood manufacturing. Did you see that as a transition to another program, or would you like to see that program come back? What's your feedback on that?
Well, currently, I don't know if I would like to see that program come back because I took the opportunity to hire the instructor, who's been a huge asset to us in our training center. So I guess the demise of one thing was a very proactive approach to another process. So that's been an amazing fit. Having that kind of a skill set with the teaching background has been absolutely huge to work with our participants in the program. My wish list would be to be able to hire them full time and create a continuous intake to work with participants and help them become that much more job ready. I look at it, honestly, I have many members that are looking for people in the cabinet making industry, like Tops to Floors, Prestige Kitchens, and a few others that are looking for people with that skill set, and that program is not there now.
Gord?
I just think, wouldn't it be, if we could recruit more, we could do more programming at Holland College by recruiting people from outside of the province in, so we can get a better establish all aspects, and that might be one of them, but I'm glad that,
Yeah, no, for sure. And I will say, and should hear from Sandy as well, president of Holland College. We've had a lot of really great discussions lately, and seeing where industry can finally work together with the college and create maybe a new stream, another platform, micro-credentials, and that is where we can work together to create opportunity. Like I said, not everybody's has the availability to go to post-secondary. Let's get them out there working. Let's get them earning. And then once they start learning about a trade, then maybe they can transition back. Maybe they can work on micro-credentials, or maybe they can, get some funding to become, go full-time or something along that line. It opens up so many more possibilities than having them out there doing nothing.
Gord?
That's it for me, Chair. Thanks for coming. This is very informative. I thoroughly enjoyed it.
Are there any other questions? Steve?
Micro-credentials. Could you just tell me a little bit more about what you mean? I've heard you say it many, many times here.
Yeah, so the micro-credential platform, I'm not well versed on it at this date, but micro-credential is a portion of a training platform. So it's kind of like a block in the apprenticeship program. You would have like kind of micro blocks. Maybe a micro credential would be on you're accredited for hanging doors and installing windows and framing. That may be a micro credential that you work on, over the first 3 months or the first 6 months or something. And having that, different aspects, that's something that's going to have to be, established, based on a curriculum. But that's kind of what we were some of the discussion has been, and some of that we'll be able to do online with our VR. Some of that, we all have smartphones now. Maybe a coworker can video you, installing a door. In our training center, we actually built a lab on wheels that it's 3 wall sections, and those wall sections one is for the installation of a door, the other is an installation for a window, and part of that whole thing is doing drywall and insulating as well. We have a rolling electrical board and a rolling plumbing board and stuff, so having that interaction in separate areas and the availability to do it, instead of trying to do it all at once, having the availability keeps people working, gets people out working. It's something that they can do in the evening or Saturday morning or something. It's not taking them out of the workplace. One of the big challenges right now in the apprenticeship program, great program, but me as an employer, if I have 4 apprentices working for me, all of a sudden, I'm booked to 2023, all of a sudden, they're returning for 6 weeks to school. I've now lost those people. My productivity level went from here to here. I'm talking about adding more pressure and stress. As an apprentice too, I'm losing that work. I now have to go to school. So the employer themselves are losing tenfold. The apprentices are losing as well. They're gaining on the accreditation side of it, but they're losing for those 6 weeks. So there's appetite now and to revamp platforms, try something new, think out of the box, and industry is very interested in working at ways to try and create those opportunities. So.
Stephen?
Thank you. So it sounds like all those sounds like wonderful things. I mean, that sounds like it could be a win for the worker, win for the employer, but it sounds like there might be an opportunity to perhaps speed up access to a workforce for the industry as a whole, and to get some more housing built if we're having trouble with that. If you can get those folks that don't need the entire Red Seal, that's the kind of idea there, is it? So that you can get people out there working right away and have access to workforce that might not have the time to put into writing all those blocks. Yeah, that's it.
Yeah, no, for sure. Another aspect that we're looking at too is mentorship. We've got a lot of tremendously skilled people out there that have recently retired and things. Maybe there's a way to bring those folks back to the job sites a few hours a week to work with the apprentices and the young people on the sites, because they have a wealth of knowledge and experience that we're really losing or have lost. We need to look at new ways of bringing that back, because there's so much demand that an experienced carpenter today with an apprentice, they really don't have the time to spend with that individual to show them more of the step-by-step process. They're in so much demand from their employer to get this job done, because you as a homeowner or you as a business owner need into your building. So unfortunately it's a vicious circle, and we need help, and as an association, to create those opportunities and those avenues to help out our employers.
Perfect. Thank you, Stephen. Thank you both. We are coming to the end of it. I just had one quick question. Again, everything was very insightful. I really appreciate the great presentation. It does look like things have come a long way since when you would make the island clock in construction class in grade 9. Just on that, working in the trades previously, you talked briefly about net zero. Is that something that you were actively promoting in the programs for specifically maybe the students?
Oh, very much so. Climate change and energy efficiency and that is top priority for many today, and it has to be. So we have to do more to encourage that. We're looking at new procedures and products that are capitalizing on the net zero and the climate change. So we have to be more diligent in educating industry and students on those opportunities moving forward. It is our future. It has to be our future. So as an industry, we really have to lead the way. We have to do more to lead that way, to have our builders building to those standards and that. So and back to Gord's comment, having skilled, qualified people is even more valuable today than it ever was before.
I think on that, we will come to a conclusion, but I do again want to thank you, Sam, and thank you, Craig, for coming in for your wonderful presentation, and keep up the great work and have an enjoyable summer.
Thank you
busy
very
season.
much. You as well. Take care.
So we will just take a short recess while we welcome our new guests. And welcome back for the Standing Committee on Education and Economic Growth. We have our next guests in. Speaking of the same topic, just a briefing on the labor shortages here in Prince Edward Island. And so we have Holland College, we have the president, Sandy MacDonald, and we have vice presidents, Doug Currie and Natalie Mitton. Welcome, everyone. So, perfect. I'll get you just to introduce yourselves for Hansard, if that's possible, and then you can start on your presentation.
Great, thank you, Zach. My name is Sandy MacDonald. I am the president of Holland College.
I'm Doug Currie. I'm one of the two vice presidents, and I oversee corporate and strategic development. So,
Good afternoon, I'm Natalie Mitton, and I VP Academic and Applied Research.
Okay, perfect. So, thank you very much. And again, the committee is very excited to see your presentation. So if it's all right with you, you can go through your presentation, and then we'll open up for questions from the committee afterwards.
Great, thanks. Thanks for having us, and it's nice to be here again. Wasn't quite sure what the committee wanted to hear today, so I'm going to be slight on the slides and long on the Q&A. I was a deputy minister for quite some time, and as a deputy, I learned that the perfect presentation to a bunch of ministers was one slide and lots of discussion. Don't have the perfect presentation today. We have a dozen slides, but there's lots of time for communication after. I'll go through them fairly quickly. Just by way of introduction, the college, we have at any given time 2,500 students in 7 sites across PEI in our programs proper, so around 68 programs. We also have, in addition, about 1,000 students who are part of our language instruction for newcomers. That's a continuous intake program that runs from basic August to August. So those students are spread around the Charlottetown area. We also have about 700 adult education students. Those are students who typically have finished public school and come to us later on to get either a GED. Most come to get one or more high school academic credentials, and those 700 are spread across the province. And we also have 2,000 students in 11 partner institutions in China. So we run 8 programs there. Some of those schools have 1 program, some have 2 programs. None are permitted more than 2. So when you count up all the people who are studying under the Holland College credential in any given year, we probably deal with about 6,000 learners in various and sundry forms. The challenges that we're facing, the challenge in the very first slide, it kind of encapsulates it fairly well, I think. When you look at what we've been dealing with, and I'd remind the group that this is not has anything to do with the virus. So these numbers are things that we were dealing with prior to the virus in 2019. So the virus accelerated the issue, but it did not create the issue. So if you look at the labor market enters, for every 1990, which wasn't all that long ago, for every 10 people who are retiring, there were 20 people to replace them. So this is the labor market in which I kind of grew up. There were always more people than there were jobs, and it was always a hustle to find a job, and you didn't give up the job you had till you found another one to go to. So that's the way it was. In 2006, that evened out. For every person retiring, there was a person coming in. By now, we're in a structural deficit. For every 10 persons who are retiring, there's only 7 available to replace them. And then you get to 2040, 20 years from now, it'll be roughly 8. That's obviously a projection, but it's fair to say that the problem is with us, and without significant interventions, changes, it's going to only worsen. So, and when we look at one of the challenges we're facing as a college, we deal with industry almost daily basis, certainly on a weekly basis, and then we're getting a lot of concerns from industry, especially in the rural areas, but not confined to the rural areas, that they can't find people, or they can't find people with a certain skill set. And when you look at the last 10 years in terms of the population evolving here on PEI, Queens County has gone from 77 to about 94,000. You can see the numbers there for Kings and Prince. Most importantly for us, in 2020, the 15 to 64 age group, which is the prime working group, we've seen an increase in 8,500 in the Queens County area, but a slight decrease in Kings and Prince. And of course, the vast bulk of this increase is due to the immigration. We are seeing if we were to run this into 21, 22, and 23, we'd see an increase in those Kings and Prince numbers and improving in those, because we know that now there's a lot of international people moving into Kings County and Prince County. So slowly but surely that is changing, but it's still at present a challenge. In terms of application trends, it's important to recognize that for every application we get at the college, it takes 2 to 3 applications to fill a seat, mainly because students will apply to 2 or sometimes 3 or sometimes 4 institutions, hoping to get into one of the program they want. And sometimes even within an institution, they'll apply to 2 or 3 programs and get in one and leaving the other 2 applications. So we feel between 2 and 3 applications will bring us a student. And if you look at 16, 17, so 5 years ago, we had about 4,700 applications. 4,200 of those and 56 were domestic, which meant Canadian. The others, 462, were international. So you can see the ratio of them is about 10 to 1 in favor of domestics. If you go to this academic year, we're just finishing. We've got 5,453 applications. We had 2,938 of those were domestic, so Canadians, the bulk of those PE Islanders. International was up to 2,500. You can see the six-fold increase in the applications. And for this coming academic year, the 21-22, we have in our books now about 6,000 applications. 3,000 of those are domestic, 3,000 of those are international, roughly. So we've seen over that 5-year period a balancing out. And when you look at that first slide on the numbers, domestic numbers, you can see why there's been a balancing out. We have fewer Canadians, and in particular fewer Islanders making the application, because there's fewer Islanders coming out of our public school system. Slip it over to enrollment trends. Now this is the actual numbers we're getting down to, and I've said we've 2 to 3 to 1. So in 16, 17, we actually had, and this is our programs, the 2,500 I mentioned off the top. This does not include the international program language. It does not include our adult education. It does not include the programs in China. There's only ones here in our 7 sites in PEI. So our total registration 16-17 was 2,482. The numbers of those that were domestic, Canadian or PEI, 2,256, and the international was 226. So you look at the change just in the 5 short years since then. This past academic year, we had 2,244 students. 1,641 of those are domestic, and 603 of those are international. So we saw a tripling of the number of internationals just in a 5-year period. And 21-22, the academic year we're starting this August, we should have 2,283. These numbers have been affected somewhat by the virus. I'll get into that in a little bit in a minute. So 2,283, 1,643 are domestic, and 640 are international. So we've seen, again, an increase of a balancing of the numbers, but a decrease in domestics and an increase in internationals. I'll get through these numbers. I know they're kind of boring in a second. So we just go to year 1. This is our first year now. So we have some 1-year programs, some 2-year programs, and a couple of 3-year programs. So we normally the 2nd-year enrollments are lower than the 1st-year enrollments, because some of the programs only a number of them are 2nd or 2-year programs. So in our first year, 3 years ago, we had 1,419. You see the breakdown, domestic and international. This year, projected, we'll have 1,485. So we're doing okay in year 1. This year, 1,065 of those are from Canada or PEI, and 420 will be from international sites. The ratio we have now is about, and the one we'd like to keep roughly, is about 55% local students, so PEI students, 21% other Canadians, mostly Atlantic Canadians, but from across the country, really, and then 24% international. I think that's a good balance between and among those 3 groups. So that's year 1, and you'll note in year 1, 2021, we had 1,329 students, which was low on those 4 years. That's because of the virus. So the virus struck us in the 2nd semester of our 18-19 year. And the problem there was, as the students are registering for last year, not this coming year, but last year, they were unsure as to what was happening with the virus, whether there be face-to-face programming, which is what our college is all about, not online. So we saw a dip in our first-year numbers there, but we're back up this year, and hopefully we'll be able to get those young people into Canada and into PEI when the time comes. So enrollment trends year 1, enrollment trends year 2, you can see there that the 805, the 798 this year is our lowest number in 3 years. That's because, again, of the first years last year now coming into second year. So they're also impacted by the virus. But you can see our ratios again, second years, 800, the total, 578 domestics, 220 internationals. So go to the next slide, please. This is the trend across the country. I don't know if that comes up as colors or not. My eyesight's not that good anymore. But yeah, the blue is the universities and the red is the colleges. And what we're looking at, now this data is about 3 years old, is basically indicating that right across the country, we're finding that there's been fewer domestic students in our post-secondary institutions, colleges and universities, and more international students. And simply because of the declining birth rates across the country, in Atlantic Canada in particular, you can see there that PEI is no exception, that we're having to fill our empty seats because of demographics with international students. Our situation is probably better than most, but some other institutions are quite challenged in this area. So that's the Canadian, Atlantic Canada, and PEI situation. Now, this is the actual applications and enrollments for this coming year from our high schools. Also quite telling. Last year, we had about 125 applications directly from Island High School, so these are grade 12 kids. Given that we've got about 1,650 graduates, this numbers we feel we can do a lot better in this number. So this year we put an enormous amount of time and effort into our high schools, and it's led by Doug. And so direct from high school applications this year are at 297, up about 138%. The applications indirect are the numbers of high school students who come to us who have been out of school for more than a year. So they're not from directs. And you see there we've got 784 last year. We can identify each school they went to in terms of high schools. We'll have 1,160 this year. And that's up about 48%, which is where we want those numbers to be. So we're very pleased at that. So that graphic on the bottom is a little hard to read. I'll have to walk you through this. I should have put a note on the bottom of the page. So the 297 is the high school direct. Those are coming from right out of that 1,650 I mentioned. The post-high school, 378, those are kids who are already been out of school at least a year, and they're coming back to us. The adult education, I mentioned we have about 650 to 700 adult education students a year. We've got 113 coming from that group. Post-secondary, 273. These are people who've been to university, graduated from university, been to college, or graduated from college and are coming to us. We have any number of pathways with other schools, so this is not unusual. At any given time, we'd have about 40% of our population who've been to university or university grads. Post-secondary, Holland colleges means we have a smaller group inside the college programs proper who are going, who are studying high school credits. They're coming right into the programs. That's 34. And the last 45 unknown is a group that they come to us as mature students, or they don't fill out the form and say what high school I went to. So that gives us some indication then of exactly what we're getting on a yearly basis from our local population. So here's the challenges, and we've heard a little bit of Sam's presentation before, so we spent a lot of time with industry. You saw this first slide. We know that 50% more Canadians will retire than will enter the labor market over the next 20 years. We're not factoring in here the number of immigrants we have or some of the other issues we need to, but it's fair to say that we're not going to grow our way out of this simply by having more children, I don't think. My mother had 14 children. There's not too many of my mothers around anymore, but this is not going to be simply a demographic solution. We have to do a variety of things, which I'll talk about in a minute. So we have the labor market in Atlantic Canada is about 1.3 million people. 1.3 million jobs would be a better way to describe it. We have about 87,000 here on PEI. So without any interventions, doing the things we're doing now, and we're doing a lot now, that will shrink by about 130,000. So not only will we not be able to replace the workers who are leaving through attrition or retirement, it's going to be very, very difficult to grow our economy if we don't have this and more. Next slide, please. So this is a study that was done, it's a little misleading, it's done by Memorial University. The data is as of March 21st, March 2021, so it's the latest data we have on what businesses are thinking. So they surveyed 800 Atlantic employers, including 100 employers on PEI. And what we heard from them through this research, not surprising to us, is the last 3 years, 52% of employers have difficulty filling job vacancies. We've probably heard from most of them, I'm sure. And the two issues are too few applicants and/or applicants without numeracy, skills, and experience. So not only do we have a labor shortage, as most of us know, we also have a skill shortage, which we can talk a little bit about. And so just go back to that slide for one other point, please. So in this 74% of these respondents, so 74% of these 800 respondents are saying that their province, this is not PEI, this is now the 4 Atlantic provinces, will face more severe shortages of skilled labor in the next 3 years. So they're seeing the problem now, and they're predicting that the problem will be there 3 years from now, if not a little bit worse. So next slide. We only have a couple more slides, so you can bear with me here. So in what we're doing in the last 2.5 years, prior to the COVID virus, but being exacerbated COVID virus, is we've had to work with a variety of industries and groups to find ways to get people into the labor market quicker while still having quality programming so they can meet their labor and skill shortages. So we're working with the apprenticeships, the early childhood, and this is only a partial list here. Sam would have mentioned our work with the Construction Association. We don't have the IT industry here. We don't have the, we have the agriculture here. These are some of the broad industry groups that we're working with now. And I'll just pick a couple here off the list. The second one there, the early childhood care and education, it was pretty clear once the virus was lifting that we could not open our early year systems because they could not be fully staffed. So we developed a program working with the other Atlantic colleges and ourselves where it's a 3-step program where people come in, they'll take 3 courses, then go to work in the center, take their first year courses in a blended fashion, so some face-to-face, some online, get their first year off, do the same, and then they get a pay bump, then they do their second year the same way, and then get a pay bump, and then they're fully certified early child care workers. And we would have about 60, 50, 70, Natalie?
We've got almost 30 in the first year, and in the second year, we've got about 12 right now.
Okay, so there are 40 people in that particular program now. The Bioscience technology program, it's a bit unique. We started this one well before the virus. The bioscience industry is perhaps the fastest growing industry on PEI in many cases, and they were certainly busy during the COVID crisis. We found here that industry was telling us that the university graduates in chemistry and biology didn't have the lab skills that our graduates, we have a 2-year lab program, didn't have the broader skills. So we created a model where we had the 3rd-year students at UPEI coming and studying in our labs for their 3rd year. So they, instead of taking the 3rd year at UPEI, they take it at Holland College in our labs, then go back for their 4th year at UPEI. They get UPEI's credential and our credential. They're almost automatically hired by an industry. They want to go to grad school, they're getting in automatically because of the lab component. So we expanded this program now across Atlantic Canada to 2 other colleges, 3 universities, and a number of industries right across Atlantic Canada. So it's got about $4.5 million worth of future skills center funding from Ottawa, and a significant amount of money from Industry Canada as well. And I'll pick on, the small business support is another one, very interesting. In our Alberton campus, we have a MIN support program, small business support program, aimed at people who are working. Most of our students do not want to study online. They like to study face-to-face more than anything else. But these 2 programs in Alberton we put online, and we saw the enrollment rates double because they're accessing people who are already working and don't mind working online because they see this is going to get them another job. So these types of initiatives are a microcosm of the work we're doing with industry these days. The pushback we're getting from industry is, can you get more workers to us in a quicker fashion? And it's a challenge in some ways because we're trying to get people in, and I heard you ask Sam about micro-credentials. Natalie will answer any questions on micro-credentials, so she's leading our charge on that. But the idea is that we get people training and then working as they train. So that's a new initiative for us. And I just get to turn to the last slide. So we've been working as a group working in labor force research and innovation, and the provincial government has this in the throne speech as the Agency for Workforce Development, I think. And so what it's focused on is doing these types of projects I had in the previous slide, in particular these 4 areas. First is upskilling and reskilling existing workers, because industry will often tell us, I can't lose Sandy for a year or 2 years to go to your school. I need him, but he needs a different skill set. Or I brought in new software, he needs to be able to learn that software or learn how to use this equipment. So upskilling and reskilling existing workers is a main thrust here for us. Attracting unrepresented groups to the labor market. Gave you a few numbers a few moments ago about the underrepresented people in our labor market. In Atlantic Canada, for example, if we were to have women working to the same degree as men, so at 65% of the men are in the labor market, it's about 58% of the women. If we had 58% of the women jump to 65% as the men, it would be another 71,000 people employed. Very similar when you look at if we get people who are 55 to 69, if we could increase the proportion of those people still working just by 5%, we'd have another 30,000 workers. Our citizens of color, our Indigenous citizens, our people with disabilities, all of those, if we could focus on getting more of those people into the labor market, this is what this work is about, we would go a long way towards dealing with that structural deficit I talked about in the very first slide. So getting more people in the labor market who previously were underrepresented would be a significant growth goal, in addition to our immigration policies. C, the third thing is provide learners with more focused and integrated learning experiences. We get lots of feedback from industry about essential skills. I'm sure we've heard employability skills, or essential skills, or 21st century skills, or literacy and numeracy skills. This has been going on for the last 20 years at least. Part of the problem is some of these skills are very hard to teach in a classroom and are much better taught on a factory floor. And up to this point, a lot of the times when you send a young person out into the field after they've done their work with us, they don't have very good interpersonal skills or may not work well with others. So what we're focusing on is getting them out into the workforce sooner while they're still a student at the college, so we can work with the industry and get feedback on their essential skills. Our bioscience model that we're working with, that's how that's designed. So instead of waiting 2 years and then put you out on an internship, we'd like to get you out after the end of your first semester and then get feedback from industry on how you're doing. So it could be Trish, for example, could be a phenomenal lab person, but maybe not get along with the people next to her. You may not even know that. So we'd be saying, okay, Trish, they're raving about your lab skills, but you know, you're upsetting the guy next to you in the lab. So the fact that we'd be able to give that back and forth to Trish, so industry would help in the evaluation of Trish's essential skills, we think it's a much better way to teach these skills than simply teach them in the classroom. And the last piece, and perhaps in many ways the most challenging piece, is the research in labor supply and demand and analysis. Now, we don't know where the next jobs are going to be 5, 7, 9, 10 years from now. We don't know what they're going to be. But we have a very good idea of what the skills are going to be. And so for us, it's very, very important that we recognize what that skill development is going to be required and develop programming around it. Program review and evaluation in there, for example, the whole labor force initiative, is that actually working? Are the initiatives we're bringing forward with industry, do they work? Are they getting people jobs? We do this constantly with our own programs, finding out whether they're getting employment when they leave, but are we doing it in these new projects? Attitudinal analysis, we're heavily involved with the province and the university on the new Clean Tech initiative. So together with the university, we're building a Clean Tech Academy in Georgetown. Well, one of the big issues there, which is unusual, is that we know the technology that will help us live a greener lifestyle, but for some reason, a lot of people aren't following them. So we know a big piece of that clean tech issue is going to be attitudinal. How do we change people's attitudes? How do we do it when we run in the green bin program, for example? So attitudinal analysis would be a big piece here. The bottom line is those last 3 words in the slide, is that our approach to training has to be more accessible than it has been. And again, this is not a virus issue, this was a demographic issue. It has to be more flexible. So accessible means we got more people who to this point couldn't get into the college because I couldn't leave my job or I had childcare demands or what have you. It has to be more accessible, it has to be more flexible. You talked about micro-credentials a little bit earlier, and that's basically an issue of flexibility. And our citizens have to be more informed. Give you a good example, we looked at the high school numbers, the 1,650 that are coming out of grade 12, and we feel that we can double the number of kids going to university and college, but we need to get at those kids in grade 9, not in grade 12. Parents, who are the greatest source of information for high school students in terms of what they're going to do, need to know where those jobs are, what they pay, what the growth potential is, what the work conditions are, because we know there are a lot of jobs going unfilled in PEI, but there's a lot of people not realizing the jobs are even available. And so the guidance counselors in the high schools, they're often overwhelmed with the clinical work that they do, and the career counseling issues. We need to do a better job, and we've been dealing with the Department of Education, very positive stuff that they're doing there, so we're hoping to partner with them to make sure those numbers coming out of high school, we think we can double them in the next 3 to 4 years, and we think that instead of having 46% of our workforce with high school credentials or less, that we can get that way up to 70 or 75%. That would be our goal. So I'll stop there. Doug, did you want to add anything? Or Natalie, I know you're behind me here a little awkward, but...
I think they're going to open up for questions so we can chip in where we need.
All right, perfect. Well, thank you very much, Sandy. That was a great presentation. A few numbers there. First, I'm going to open it up to questions. We'll start with Stephen.
So do you guys see any particular barriers to enrollment, cost of tuition or accessibility is something that you were talking about there, making it more accessible to more people. Do you have any identified barriers to people enrolling?
Yeah, we would think, I wouldn't say, Stephen, it would be financial, because if you're a first-year student coming to Holland College, when you're counting the Island Advantage and the George Coles, your first year is almost free, basically. What the disadvantages you see or the barriers you see would be more likely to be historical. You know, I'm not going to college. I don't have a plan coming out of high school, or I want to get into the industry. I start working after my first year in high school so I can develop an unemployment insurance claim and maybe and I start working and making money. I think there are still some challenges for childcare for single parents. I think that's still a challenge. I think on Aboriginal and citizens of color, I think there's still some things that we can do to improve that situation, because we think we're doing a good job, but we don't know for sure until we measure that. So I think I wouldn't say it's as much financial as some of these other cultural and historical issues.
Thank you. And I'll just say to Natalie and Doug, if you do want to add on, by all means. Stephen?
I think she might want to add on to this one. So on that note, would micro-credentials themselves, is that leading into more accessibility for just, yeah.
So in regards to micro-credentials, as a college, we've just built a framework, and with any processes that we do have from a program, from a curriculum perspective, we build a framework with certain outcomes and measures to ensure that we're meeting the mark and a standard. So to quickly define a micro-credentials, or how we defined it, and it's a pan-Atlantic definition, so we've adopted, there's a nationally, CICAN is a national body, and Holland College has adopted that framework, so there would be consistency across Canada. And specifically what we've introduced is the ability to apply a bit more rigor and assessment to it. And I'll drill it down even further. What that would mean would be there's a specific skill that a company or a sector is requiring or needing. You would target that skill, and then that skill would be demonstrated or performed and measured. And then that skill could be stackable with other skills and lead to a credit, or potentially long-term, potentially a certificate or diploma, or it could be standalone just to meet that sector's need. So it doesn't necessarily have to ladder or be stackable, but it can, or it also can be for non-credit, but recognized as a need in the sector. And there's been a lot of provinces that have been more involved, or not involved is not the word, colleges that have been a bit more advanced in that space. Ontario campus, there's a bunch of provinces that, not a bunch, there's a few provinces that would be a little bit more involved, but I think the position the position we're taking is looking at the best practices from the other colleges and building our framework and executing from there and really taking the lead from the sector. This needs to be sector driven because you need that collaboration from the sector and the industry for it to meet the need and to be consistent.
Okay. Stephen? Or sorry.
One of the things that we strongly believe in at the college is that when somebody graduates from us, that they have the choice to do what they want to do. We don't want to trap people in a dead-end issue, so that the micro-credential needs to be able to lead to something else. Now, if the young person decides, oh, I'm going to stay right here and do this job, that's fine. But we don't want to make sure that we want to make sure that they have choice then to say, well, if I want to get that full red seal credential, this is going to get me there. So it's not, I have to go back and start over. So anything we give them in that sense needs to ladder onto something else. And our program now, we have, how many pathways, Doug, do we have?
25 right now with the University of Prince William.
So we have a significant number of our programs. If you want to go on to another college or university, you have the ability to do so, if you so desire. But we want to make sure that when they leave the college, they have the choice to sell their services to the highest bidder in the labor market, which we think is what we're about.
Stephen?
Thank you. So would they need to be enrolled in a full-time course, or could they just come along for this one particular micro-credential and away they go?
What we're planning on doing is, our goal is to run it through our customized training office, and so very customized. So for example, again, if a sector comes forward and says, I need this specific skill, we would build based on the requirement, look at what we have internally within our existing program, probably pull some outcomes, or potentially build it in collaboration with other colleges or stand alone to meet the need. But it would run out of our customized training office, and we can turn things fairly quickly. And the duration can be anywhere from a couple hours to several days, weeks, or a couple of months. So it just depends on the actual need and what the requirement is. So it'd be very customized and very attractive because you can turn it quickly. And the big opportunity with micro-credentials is to be able to maneuver them around within Canada and different provinces to have that recognition and to all be talking the same language, to say, I have this micro-credential in this skill, and then it's recognized in other provinces. So that's one of the big drivers of this Pan-Canadian initiative and this Pan-Canadian framework, is to have that consistency so they can be known and the awareness and recognized.
Okay. And Doug, you wanted to add something?
Yeah, just a couple things. I think it's interesting, I've been at the college for 2 years, so what we're seeing, and we're seeing the intensity of it rising. You're seeing industry coming to us. I mean, our full focus is to be responsive to all the sectors to respond to their labor market needs, both private and public. I think what we're seeing consistently right now is we're seeing industry coming to us, all sectors, and they're looking for innovative, creative ways to provide additional training, upskilling, because they can't afford to send their staff back to school because of the pressures they're having trying to find labor. So what we're seeing at the college is that we have to be very innovative and creative, and we have to pivot quickly to be able to respond. So it's an opportunity for the college, but it does present some challenges because of the shortages are forcing industry to want training as opposed to 2-year programs, 6 months programs, part-time, blended. So it's evolving fairly quickly. I think that's safe to say. Yeah.
And we've also been asked to, for example, in the practical nursing, because it's every industry on PEI, whether it's education, healthcare, private industry, aquaculture. So, for example, in the practical nursing shortage, we have a program now in Charlottetown and a program now in Summerside. We're going to be offering a third program this year. I think it's in December, January, Natalie. Trying to significantly increase the number of practical nurses that are available to work in our hospitals and homes. So we do get those calls too. For example, and we're putting in a resident care worker, another one in Alberton this year. So it depends too on the geographic area a little bit what the needs are. So that's not unusual as well. So in addition to the shorter programs and innovative ones, they want us to run full programs. And Natalie and I met with the IT reps on Friday last with the COA, and they're clear they want another. We also have 2 computer information system programs. They'd like a third, so we'll be working on that, trying to get that up. It's a little late to get up for September, but we'll probably get it up for November.
Okay. We do have other people that are on, but do you want to go with another question? I can put you back on the list.
Sure. So these micro certifications are, could just as an example, an electrician, could they get certified to install the refrigerant part, the HVAC part of a heat pump, and then do the entire installation? Is that the kind of thing we'd be talking about here?
No, do you want to handle
I want to be measured in my response. I guess what I would say by that is, as a post-secondary institution, we want to ensure that we educate to the highest standard, and that's where we have our certificate and diploma programs. When we refer to micro-credentials and the customized training, it's meeting the immediate demand, reskilling and upskilling. So there would be components that could occur within that, but I wouldn't want to say that that would certify them, because in order to meet certifications, there's standards or accrediting bodies, et cetera. So I'd be very cautious in that, and we're early days, so we wouldn't be certifying at this point. It would be building to get them to that position.
Yeah, certification, Steve, would not be our, the external certification, the certifications are external. So we'd have to, it's just like a Red Seal, we train to the Red Seal level, they have to write the exam, it's not our exam. All of our health programs write national certified exams, they're not our exams, so we have to train them to that level. But if if the certification board doesn't recognize the credential, then it's no good to the student. Yeah.
We're audited.
Yeah.
And so forth.
Yep.
And money, and I mean, the accessible and flexible aspect of this, I think, is fantastic. So opportunities here. It's going to be challenges, as Doug mentioned there. But what kind of, like, as far as accessibility goes, if you just needed one particular skill, obviously it's going to be less resources for the college and it's going to cost less. Do you have any idea of what the pricing mechanism you're going to use for this?
I think I can answer that one. When Natalie talked about the complexity of things, that's exactly what one of the challenges are. So I'll use your example of an electrician. So we have our 2-year electrician program, and say you came and said, look, I only need one section of that. And if we did have a micro-credential, that micro-credential will count towards your Red Seal. It will count as you went across the country. If you came back to us to finish off your electrical program, you're not going to expect to pay for that component because you've already paid for it. So it makes things a lot more complicated in terms of the tuition fees and how we do things. And there is also a process called the Prior Learning Assessment and Recognition process, which you might have heard about in this committee, a PLAR process, where Currie could have been working for years as an electrician, but no certification, then decides, well, I want to go in and get my certification. So he would have to demonstrate for us how much of that electrician program we'll give him credit for, and then again, he'd only have to pay for the rest. So they sound great in theory, and they are really good. They're very, very complicated to get them through, and when you're working with more than one certification process across the country, it becomes much, much more complicated. And we don't want to give people a micro-credential that's no good to them only for that one skill. We want to give it to them if they want to go and take a whole program. So.
And Doug, you wanted to add something?
Yeah, just to Emily Howard's point, it's we've got three revenue streams at the college. We have our grant from the province, we have our tuitions, and we have auxiliary services. Those are our three contributors to contribute to the operational responsibilities of the college. The reality, as we continue to explore and look at new ways to train and support industry, we don't have budget lines, we don't have sort of an innovation fund to allow us to tap into, which does create some problems, because when we deal with these industry leaders, whether it's private sector or whether it's government coming, there has to be the ask for them to prepare the budget additionally, because everything that we have is already maxed out in our operational budgets and programs and so on. So there's certainly opportunities there, but I think the college is going to continue to be required to evolve. I mean, you see the numbers, industry's changing, the future of work's changing. We have to continue to be adaptive and evolve as an organization and as a post-secondary training facility. So, yeah, that's part of some of the realities.
Yeah. Thanks. Gordon?
Thank you, Chair. Just a simple question to start. This has been an enormous year for everybody. How are the students?
Well, Gordon, let me take you back, because prior to the COVID virus, the September of that year, we also had a hurricane in the Bahamas, which devastated. And we had about almost 200 Bahamian students at the time. So we had to rethink how we were supporting our students. And we got directly involved in paying rent, paying tuition, paying for food, because a lot of the kids who came to us their parents were helping, and their parents no longer had work. So we were, unfortunately, I guess, prepared a little bit for the virus when it came in, because it was the same sort of issue with our students, to the point where I remember the three of us delivering Christmas dinners this past Christmas to the residents, because we felt that was something that we could do. We probably spent more on student support. I know we did spend more on student support for that year and a half than we did in the previous 5 years, simply because we felt it was a way to help our students. We are creating a new wellness center as part of this initiative to move towards better flexibility with the industry. Another big move for us was to ensure that our students are as well as they could be. So we're setting up a wellness center under Doug, and to not leave the guesswork whether we're supporting our students as well as we can. But it was a challenging year for everybody, and I think we did a pretty good job. From our enrollment numbers and our student surveys, they're telling us that they're pretty happy. But we'd like to be a little more able to quantify how well we're doing with that.
Doug?
Yeah. Emily McNeil, a good question. As the president alluded to, I think something that was more of a good fortune and somewhat strategic is Natalie and I led the exercise to create a new strategic plan for the college. And just before the world went into a shutdown, we were about to present the final product to the board, and of course everything shut down. So we brought that document back to the board in the following September, and I think that's been a significant blessing, because there's 4 key pillars that we live and breathe. There's obviously innovative and flexible program. The second pillar would be supports and inclusion. The third would be environmental sustainability, and the fourth would be corporate innovation. So those 4 pillars are everything we do every day and all day. And I think that's been a real blessing for us as an organization, that it's sort of allowed us a path forward. And in some respects, COVID we knew where we had to go as a post-secondary institution. And I think under Natalie's leadership, particularly on the program side, we had to basically, I use the word pivot, but, we had to move from a regular approach to programming to an online approach to finish the first, academic calendar year. So it's been, in a lot of ways, COVID has fast-tracked us to be who we are today compared to where we were.
Gordon?
Yeah, thanks a lot. It's good to know, you have a strategy moving forward, and I mean, I thought about the college a lot, and UPI a lot during all this, and kudos to your transition. So we're looking at September. You have 640 students potentially enrolled who are, they're coming in from the outside. I think in March, Sandy, you were talking about you will be fully operational or having people back in September. Is that still the case?
Gord, just to your point, so the biggest selling point we have at the college, why people come to us, is very clear. Our surveys tell us the students come to us and want to get a job. And the 2 things that we kind of tell them is, not only will you get a job 95% of the time 3 months after you graduate, and we have all those numbers, it's also it's going to be a heavy emphasis on hands-on learning and a heavy emphasis on small class sizes. So we wouldn't have a class size bigger than 40 in the whole school. When the virus struck in March, that first year, our students already had a good working relationship with instructors. They already knew their classmates, already worked in teams in their classes. So we were able to get through that period because we had all that in place for that first year. But it took us till the next October to finish with all our students that graduate because we had to do it in small groups. We had to do it face-to-face. We couldn't get into the hospital or the hospitals or the old folks' homes or the dentist's office. So we couldn't do deep dives. But we finally got it got it done. And by the time the second and third semester rolled around, we had figured out a way, even with the social distancing and the masks, to do at least partial face-to-face. So this last January, we had everybody in the school at least part of the week, at least part face-to-face. And this September, we think, with the support of CBHO, we'll have everybody there face-to-face doing what they would have done 2 years ago. But I have to say, and Doug and Natalie led this work, it was quite a chore, because we started with the police school, and when you've got social distancing and you're trying to teach people how to arrest somebody else, it's very difficult to do that. But the things we learned from the police school, we kind of moved forward into the health programs. Culinary was probably the biggest challenge. We didn't open our kitchens. We've got well over 150 students in culinary, but we didn't open the kitchens till this past November. And even that was for online. We didn't open them for students in the kitchens with the chefs till January. So it's been an enormous challenge planning and carrying this out. And we laughed that we would make a decision on Monday, and then we'd have to change it by Friday because of that. So the communication piece was key. But I have to say, I think we did a good job. And if something happens between now and September, knock on wood, we'll have a plan B and a plan C. But it's been, I guess everybody would say the same thing, but I never thought I'd ever see something like this.
Gordon?
And there's so many more questions. Like there's a housing pinch since COVID started. I know you have residents, and luckily you did build that residence and everything's there, and that's...
That wasn't all that popular at the time, as you recall, either. So,
you know, like it's important that they come in and they have a safe place when they come in, especially traveling after the pandemic.
And I'd be remiss in not talking about the support of the province, because the province were very clear that whatever we try to do, they support us. And people may forget that the first 2 weeks of the school year last year, we had a significant number of students, both in September and in January, that were the province paid for putting up in a hotel and paid for the food and all that sort of thing. So without that support, it would have been a much more challenging academic year. And this coming year, we've got support from the province that if that were to happen again, that we'll be there to help you again. So it's nice to know that. And we have two departments, which is we have Minister Jameson's department and also Minister McKay's department, because that's where all the skills resources are. So working with those two departments, and Natalie does the bulk of this work, but they have been wonderful to work with. It's been interesting.
Yeah, just to sort of support Sandy's comment, I mean, if you saw the numbers, I mean, 75% of our enrollment is domestic, 25% of our enrollment is international. We're probably going to see a slight bump in our international because of the changes we made with our processes in the registrar's office. But and the President did allude the province, and hope we continue to get lots of support from all the MLAs in the Assembly. The province has been exceptional in respect to what they've been able to do to allow these students to come into quarantine, to, when you're dealing with families, and we have students coming from all around the world. A lot of the first years are still here, but there will be second year students. So we want to make sure that we have a plan and we meet all the requirements of the Chief Public Health Office. So our understanding is that commitment is there, and we'd like to continue to get the support from all the members to allow those students to come into the college and to the city and to the province. So.
The first slide I showed today about the numbers and the demographic challenge we're facing. There's just a piece of research generated by the New Brunswick government looked at the retention rates for college graduates. So they'd be similar to ours. And their retention rates for both their French college and English colleges in New Brunswick is 93 to 95%. So these students are coming here, they are staying here. Yeah. And they're the young people we need to drive our economy, to keep it where it is and to grow it. So it's a same as university, is a very important point. But the majority of our students are here to work. They want the 2-year program to get a 3-year work visa, then to get a permanent job. So this is I think a central part of that.
Perfect. And we'll just remind members that we've got about 10 minutes left. So Gordon.
I'll put 3 questions into one. You can answer as quick as you want. The police school, the diversity program, the BIPOC program. How is that going? I've asked 2 different ministers, and they didn't seem to even understand what was happening in that program.
Let me answer the second one first, Corey, and then the second one, first one second. The EDI program is we're hiring an EDI coordinator next month, as you're probably aware, and we're holding off on our evaluation because we want that person to take a EDI critique of all our policies and practices. So that's kind of an abeyance, but we'll be deep into that probably by the end of August. In terms of the program at the police school, we're going through the application for the police school now. We've got another 4 or 5 months before we get there, so we're looking at how we select those candidates that are going to broaden the kind of reach, the breadth and depth of the EDI approach at the police school. So that's still, we're still straight ahead with those two. The EDI issue was delayed a little bit by the COVID virus, but yeah, so we're straight ahead, and that's a big part of our strategic plan. And that strategic plan, by the way, is how the board evaluates me, so I've kind of got a vested interest in saying that's, yeah, and that's how they're evaluated, so.
And Natalie, did you want to add something to that?
No, I can just make a quick comment reinforcing what President Sandy just referenced, specifically on the EDI file. We're currently engaging on hiring a consultant just to do a preliminary scan of our current processes and where we are and identify potential gaps or opportunities for improvement. And then we do have funding aside that we will hire an EDI coordinator on a permanent basis because it's crucial. It's crucial, and we know that there's opportunities for improvement there. And I know we do make an effort. We're very conscientious, and we try to support all. But I think that we're all quite open and honest when we say there always are opportunities for improvement. So we are actively engaged in that. And I guess you can never move quick enough, but it is on slate for sure.
And to add to that, Gordon, we're an ISO certified school, one of the few in the country. We get audited at least 3.5 days every year. This year was a full audit, 6 days. And that the auditors come in and they randomly select files to see that you're following your processes. So when we do bring in and we do the critique on our policies and practices from an EDI perspective, we'll also have those evaluated by a third party. So it's not us evaluating ourselves, it's the ISO process. So that'll ensure that whatever we say we're going to do, a third party would hold us to that. And again, that's part of my evaluation as well. So.
Trish.
Thank you, Chair. So this has been a really interesting discussion today. I have a few different topics here. I'm going to try to just jump around a bit because I know we're short on time. So you mentioned that there's been a significant increase in the number of international students that are enrolled. I believe the target range was 24% based on new changes in the registrar's office, I believe Doug had mentioned. So are there also targets in terms of enrolling international students specifically around areas where there are labor shortages?
Not specifically. The international students tend to pick their programs. They're most interested in, I'd say, business, and probably less in business and marketing, those types of roles, culinary, less interested in the trades and technology. So we're not getting as many as we could there. Some programs we wouldn't run without international students because the ratio of international students to domestics is quite like 7 to 3, for example. So we don't specifically look out and say, let's fill those seats with international students. Now, if it comes to a point in the year and we're not getting any domestics, we certainly would. But typically, Trish, we would hold the first 20 seats, 20% of the seats for direct from high school students, the next 20% direct from adult education students, and then the rest would be open. So.
Doug?
Yeah, that's a great question, Emily Altas. So we've had a number of discussions about being a little more strategic in respect to targeted areas or programs that are in high demand here in the province, and 2 programs that are weak as far as enrollment numbers. We will be launching 2 new postgraduate certificate programs in September, one in project management, one in data analytics, which are 1-year programs. So we've moved to focus and we put resources into India. The college has really never put any focus on India. Right now there's 25 million people under the age of 25 in India. There's a significant exodus for post-secondary education in India to Canada. And we're trying to kind of tap into, be a little more strategic in how we attract international students. So.
Trish?
Yeah, no, and certainly, bringing international students to PEI who will then want to stay and raise their families here and be a part of the community is a fantastic thing. I wonder about, you mentioned retention rates being quite high for international students. What are retention rates for those students to stay in Atlantic Canada long term?
You mean retention rates for the graduates?
Yeah, so you had said, and I didn't catch the number, I believe it was 93%, if I heard you correctly.
Those from the Brunswick, we don't know how many specifically. That was a project specifically contracted by the New Brunswick government. They wanted to see the university versus college retention rates. So we're assuming if it's 93 to 95% in for colleges in New Brunswick, it's probably similar here.
And did they look at
Trish?
retention, how many of those graduates stay in Atlantic Canada long-term?
We haven't done that. The MPHAC does that for universities. Nobody's doing it yet for colleges, but we'd love to see the data.
Trish?
And just one more question on international students. So I believe that international students, if I'm correct, they do pay a higher tuition fees. So, are there any, we've stated a few ways that it's really important for our economy and for our society, to have international students come and stay on the island. Is there any sort of consideration in terms of the high cost for international students to do that?
We're the lowest costing international fee in Atlantic Canada. So, and we're trying to strike a balance. We like to stay that way. Because we think it's part of the attraction, but at this point, our tuition we've got in some cases the third highest tuition fees in Canada. I don't want to get into the whole funding of the college; it's probably another debate. But in terms of the international differential, the fee that the international students, we're the lowest in the region. So we don't think that is hurting our international applicants. But it's interesting, like Doug said, the demand for Canadian education, because it's safe in Canada, it's an environmentally friendly place, it's high quality. For example, the University of Toronto just put their differential up, and they saw more applicants, not fewer. So it's kind of interesting dynamic for sure.
Doug?
And I mean, so I said, I'm sure in terms of numbers, but then of course, you are closing the door for people who might be, fantastic, people to come and live and stay in Prince Edward Island based on their access to income, right? So those stats from Toronto might be, I'm glad to hear that we do have, a lower number.
I think that we are and need to continue to work with the province and ACOA. We need to continue to look at our retention rates in respect to making sure that we're, as a big recruiter of international students, we feel there's significant opportunities to attract immigrants, international students to stay here. There's no secret that immigration is going to be key to the labor market shortages in not only in Prince Edward Island but in Atlantic Canada. So we feel there's some significant opportunities for us to grow stronger alignment with the province and IRCC out of Ottawa to continue to grow our population and strengthen our labor markets with immigration.
But I do think, just to your point in the domestic side, if you were to ask me what I would see as a major opportunity for the college and the province would be to improve the skills of our existing labor market from 46% having high school or less to 20% having high school or less. That's, I think, is the low-hanging fruit. If I go back to that first slide, most people in my generation, and I'm looking around the room, not too many of us here, but we grew up with a labor surplus, and I still think a lot of people feel, well, there's lots of people around, don't worry, they'll be there. From my friends I speak to, I say, no, they're not going to be there. And so I think if we do those things we talked about with people with disabilities and women and people of color and indigenous, do all those types of things, we still have a group of people who we can still access, who can improve their skills so that they can meet the demands of the new economy. So I think that is one area where I think that we can make a significant progress. And it's great to hear the province talking about this. We've met with them a number of times, so I think we'll have a project working together very shortly on a restructuring of the high school as transitions into college. So I'm pretty excited about that.
And one last question, because we're cognizant of everyone's time. The presenters have been in, so one last question, Trish.
So I did notice, you gave some really detailed, statistics on labor force numbers. So it's based on demographics, which is pretty, easy to calculate. We have a rising, number of people that are going to be retiring versus those coming into the labor market. That's a pretty straight thing to calculate. But, and you sort of touched on this a bit, Sandy, that it's a lot harder to figure out, what the labor market changes are going to be or what the labor market needs are going to be over time. So So, I think about things like the impact of, new technologies and, so I'm wondering, I only get one question, so I'd like to know a little bit more about how you're looking at that in all of those different sectors so that we're making sure that we're preparing people, to be successful in the labor market long term. And you talked about 21st century skills. So I do believe that is, that's a key part of this, right? So, social and emotional learning, innovation, right? Where are the opportunities? Because those are the skills that our students are going to need in any line of work, right? So I guess I will just, ask a bit about, how you're preparing our students best for that evolving, changing labor market as it is.
Let me give you. We've got a number of models in place I talked about. Let me give you an example, and Doug just talked about it. The fastest growing skill set in the labor market is probably big data analytics. There's not a business now in PEI that wouldn't be collecting tons of data. Most of them don't have a clue how to organize it, certainly how to analyze it, how to use it to predict and prescribe. So when we looked at that, we said, what's an area we can help small and medium enterprise and get people in most quickly, and that's the one. The second component I'd answer your question would be all of those projects I talked about on there and more are all focused on not just giving people the technical skills, but the softer skills on which the technical skills will stick. So we are, as we're restructuring our delivery methods, we're also restructuring our curricular outcomes so that not only will you need to have these technical skills, but as I evaluate you, Trish, with BioVector, let's say you were there, we'd be able to say, let's make sure Trish has those skills as well. So it's not only new programming that we're bringing in, it's also new content in existing programs. And that's really have to, so we don't know what the next big job will be 5 years now, like a web designer was 20 years ago. We do know what those skills are going to be. And so as we restructure our programs and put that content in there, we're hoping that you'll be prepared. And the biggest one will clearly be learning how to learn. Because as soon as you graduate from our 2-year CIS program, your software skills are probably out of date already. But if we've taught you how to acquire new knowledge, then that's really what we're doing for you. So it's the content itself that's a change in addition to some of these new programs that we're bringing in.
Well, that is perfect. Thank you very much, Sandy, Natalie, and Doug. And thank you very much, members, for the questions. I know that we probably had a long list of more, but we do had a schedule, and we do thank you very much for your
come back at any time.
presentation. All right, that's noted.
Yeah.
But yeah, no, we do thank you very much, and we will take just a brief recess to continue on with the agenda.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you.
So we are back for the Standing Committee on Education and Economic Growth. Thanks again to our presenters for joining us today. So moving along in the agenda, we have the discussion of scheduling. The first thing that will be brought up is the review of correspondence. So I do want to thank the members Trish Altas and Steve Howard for sending along a letter. And this is, of course, is in response to what took place at East Wiltshire School. And just for the record, I would like to point out to the committee that I'm not sure if every committee member is aware that my wife is a school teacher at East Wiltshire Intermediate School. So I did just want to put that out. Question for the clerk. Do I read the letter into the record first, or is that something I would pass on to the committee for discussion?
It's up to the committee. Those who submitted the letter could read it if they like. Other than that,
okay. So first of all, for the members that submitted the letter, I'm just curious if you want to read it into the record or if we're just fine to discuss.
I think we're fine to discuss. It should be on record. We all have a public copy of it here. So.
Okay, perfect. Okay, so I am going to open up maybe to Stephen or to Trish, if you want to just give like a brief overview of what the letter has entailed and what you would like for the committee to discuss.
Sure. Maybe I'll just read a section of the letter, not in the entirety.
Okay.
So we are requesting that we have an urgent priority briefing from the Public Schools branch on the incidents that occurred at East Wiltshire School, including an overview of the incidents that occurred at East Wiltshire School and the public school branch's response to the incidents, a briefing on the contents and administration of the public school branch's safe and caring learning environments policy, information relating to the investigation into the incidents of conduct, including who will be responsible for conducting the investigation, the expected timeline for the investigation, and the anticipated outcomes of the investigation, and the public school branch's plans to address homophobia and bullying at a provincial level.
Okay, thank you, Stephen. So is there any discussion on that? I guess one of the things, clerk, is our timeline for this briefing to take place. Because can you just go through our schedule as of right now?
Yes. So next week, the 22nd, I've held off putting out a notice for this due to the letter, but we could have the. Sorry, let me grab my.
Is it the Cooper Institute?
Yes, the Cooper Institute is willing to come in next week. If the committee would like to try to get in some of these groups instead, I can work on scheduling that.
Trish.
So, I do believe that this is an absolutely, urgent situation that we really need to look into immediately. It is incredibly concerning, the reports that have come forward, and, I think it's perhaps just the tip of the iceberg in terms of issues that are happening in other schools as well, and we need to start looking at how we're going to address that. So I wonder if it's possible to schedule a meeting at a different time that isn't our regular time. I know that the committee schedule is a little more open than it has been in prior times, different times when we had more committees. So I don't know if the committee would be willing or interested to consider that possibility, but that would allow us to move forward with our scheduled work plan as well as address this, very current and important issue.
Okay, just on that, Heath, you did have a point?
Yeah, just, I guess I support this request, so no fear there, but I'm just looking at some clarification from the clerk. And should this committee send a request to Legislative Management Committee asking them to consider asking the Child and Youth Advocate to prepare a special report for this committee on inclusion in our school system? Based on his comments this morning in the paper, it was kind of like he's not, and Trish just mentioned it around relative to not just one school, not just East Wiltshire, but the school system. And I think this, is this systemic throughout junior highs across the province? And maybe that's where we should kind of focus our attention to, not just particular at one school. That's just my own personal opinion, but if you look at section 29, a special report can be made to a standing committee. I think the child advocate based on his comments, he was pretty thorough last night on CBC, and he was pretty thorough again today. So I'm just wondering, is it the right process to send it to legislative standing committee? Because really from our committee, based on this information, that's our process, but I'm just wondering.
I'm sure the request could be made. I will have to double check on the procedure, but I'm sure that the committee could send a letter at least requesting that the Child and Youth Advocate kind of prepare a written submission in the form of a report if you like, but I can double check on that and get back to the committee members.
So what I'm saying is public schools branch is paying for a third party to come in and do an evaluation, whereas we already have a child advocate that's sitting there, and this, to me, this is what he does. So I guess I'm kind of saying, and it could be a broader scope as opposed to pinpointing one school. Now we can look at other schools. But based on the legislation, it says that we're supposed to send it to Legislative Management Committee from our understanding, but if I'm wrong, I'm wrong. That's what I'm asking clarification on.
Yeah, Trish?
So, and I may have misunderstood what's happening, but I believe that the public schools branch is hiring a consultant, not an independent investigator. So, and we don't really know what that consultant's going to be doing. So I do think that that's part of why we need to have the public schools branch to actually come and brief on, what happened in this incident. Yes, I don't think we should overlook that. In saying that there are issues across the school system, this was a very specific incident that was organized. It was, and the level of which that organization of homophobia and bullying occurred is very concerning, and it should be looked at in terms of, we want to make sure that something like this never happens again. So I would suggest that perhaps it is not one or the other, but that we could ask for this report from the child advocate, because I agree with Heath that I do think that would be very, very valuable, and that his expert knowledge on best practices and what's missing in terms of protecting our children and youth and ensuring that our learning environments are safe. That's a great idea, but I don't think it's mutually exclusive to the request in this letter that are specific to that incident, but also about the safe and caring schools, learning environment policy, and what the public schools branch's plans are to address homophobia and bullying immediately. I think we need to hear all of this at once, basically, as close to it as we can.
Corey?
Heath, sorry, what was your proposal again?
Well, it's an overview of all the schools through the child advocate. I think that's, but our recommendation from this committee has to be sent to Legislative Management Committee for that request to happen. So we need a request to come from this committee to Legislative Management Committee. From what I understand, so I need, first of all, clarification on that. Second, if that's the case, Corey, that's what we have to do as far as getting the child advocate involved.
So I will just say that the other clerks are looking into this as we speak, so I will have advice on it in a moment.
Okay.
So if the committee wants to move on while they find that out, that's up to them.
Yeah, I think Corey still had a question or
Yeah, I
comment?
guess I'm just curious. So in Steve and Trish's letter, are you asking, I guess I'm not sure if I'm comfortable having with some of the points I think we should definitely look into, but to have the public schools branch in to question them on what happened at East Wilshire and what, I almost feel like it's our committee investigating what happened at East Wilshire School. Because we're talking, there's probably a process in place for discipline and whatnot inside a school. I'm not sure if it's a spot of a legislative standing committee to ask about what's happening in specific schools and certain incidents.
Trish?
So I do think in this case, because as I stated, that this was an organized incident at such a level that we do need to understand what happened. Now, of course, there would be the considerations for confidentiality, and we're not asking for names or specific individual actions, but what is the overview of what happened here? And we do have some of that already that's been expressed in the media, but it would be good to get that from the public schools branch directly. What really happened in this situation, and what what are the plans for the investigation? So that already in this committee, we've heard some confusion. Is it an independent investigator? Is it, public schools branch investigating itself? How is that going to work? And what are the timelines for the investigation and the expected, outcomes and actions from that sort of investigation? I think we need to understand what's happening there instead of allowing that process to roll out without the committee knowing what's going to happen or having any, any ability to know sort of behind the scenes, how it's going to be looked into and how it's going to be addressed. So I think this is going to be an issue that we're going to need to look at many times, to start to address it. But initially, I do think this was a very serious incident that happened at East Wilshire. I think we need to understand it directly from Public Schools Branch, as well as how they're going to investigate it and what they're going to do at that school, but also broadly in terms of what this is exposed as serious issues around homophobia and bullying, which are never acceptable in our schools.
Agreed. Court?
I agree. I don't think it's acceptable at all. I just don't know if it's the place for a legislative standing committee to play politics with it, to try and get it in the headline as much as possible.
It's absolutely not playing politics. I
do
find
agree
that
that
insulting.
I do agree that I think the public schools branch, just the last bullet there, the public schools branch's plan to address homophobia and bullying at a provincial level. I think that's important. We should talk to them about that. I think some of the questions around this consultant, that if it's independent, who is it, the timelines, I think those are certainly fair questions to ask the public schools branch. But to have the public schools branch in to say, okay, I'd like to know what happened at East Wilshire School exactly, how many were involved, we're talking 12, 13, 14-year-old kids here. Anyways, that's my point on it. But I think some of the points are definitely worthwhile to question them on.
Trish?
So I think we're assuming here that the public schools branch would not want to come and talk about this, which I think is an unfair assumption, actually. They very well may want to come and give some clarity to what happened and what responsible actions they are taking as next steps. So I think to assume that they wouldn't want to share what they can about what did happen and clarify some points and then be able to talk about plans for next steps is perhaps maybe a little unfair to the public schools branch, because they should have that opportunity. So I think it works both ways.
Gord?
Yeah, I mean, I think that we all understand that this is a pretty traumatic incident for the students. Everybody. This is not a good situation. We want to make sure that we look at this and do as best we can as a standing committee. And with a letter like this, I don't know if this has ever been done, but I mean, we do have a child advocate. Maybe even send this letter and get some advice from the child advocate potentially about, because I don't want to hurt any children. I want to make sure that we make things better in the end. There's some stuff here for sure we need to understand and get to the bottom of, but I would like some more information. Maybe it's a letter asking for some different things from the PSB, but I'd also like to get some advice from the child advocate so that we do not, if we're going to go look at this, we're going to look at it and we're going to make sure that we protect this age group of kids as we look into this important matter.
Good. Thank you, Gord. So is it, Gord, you had mentioned with regards to, a letter, for the people who brought forward the original letter, would a letter, where it says in here an urgent priority briefing from the public schools branch on the incidents that occurred at East Wilshire School, including, would it be, I guess, what is the committee's thoughts on if we had sent a letter to the public schools branch with the specific requests? I don't know what your thoughts on that would be. Just a question for the committee, Heath.
What was the date that they said the consultant would be back to basically the public schools branch? Was it the 27th?
I believe it was the 25th, according to a Guardian article.
So in saying that, you're likely not going to get much of a response, or the response will be minimized to the point of we're waiting to hear back what actually happened, because based on the reports out of yesterday, and if they're substantiated, we'll likely be sitting here in a week's time or 2 weeks waiting for a reply, I would assume. But I'm just being a devil advocate here. And like I said, I support the request, but let's be realistic and say, okay, are we gonna actually get anything from these guys, or are they gonna say that we're waiting for the report? And if you wanna set in motion some of these items, then albeit I'm for it, that's not a big deal, but just, I think we have to be realistic in saying, well, there has to be some sort of investigation prior to us starting to call witnesses in to get some sort of, level of comfort on who we're actually talking to and why,
Yeah.
I guess.
Okay, thank you. Heath, Trish?
Yeah, no, thank you, Heath, but I think that this is where, it's again getting muddled between the investigation and a consultant, which I'm not sure those are one and the same, actually, in what I'm understanding. So I think there's value in knowing as soon as possible, what that investigation is going to look like. If it is an independent investigation, that would be good to know as well, most certainly. But what that process is going to look like, what is the public schools branch doing to address this in the immediate, whether it's through an independent investigation and then through immediate policy action. And then there will be follow-up in that once the consultant has done whatever the work they're doing, and we would find out more about what that work is, then they can definitely come back and should come back so that this is an issue that needs to be unpacked many times, I would say, so that we can make progress. Also, I don't think we should go too far down the road of assuming what the response will be from the public schools branch. I think that we send out the request because this is an important issue and we would like to hear information about what they're doing immediately. And if they say, whatever they say, if they say we need more time, we need 2 weeks, we can talk about that response as a committee, but to sort of guess at what they might say, I don't think is necessary from our perspective. I think we recognize that this, and I'm hearing this from all the members here, that this is an important and critical issue that is having, children are being harmed through what has happened. And what may be continuing to happen in other schools. So we do need to look at this right away. We need to allow the public schools branch the opportunity to come and present on this so that we can have a better understanding and the public can have a better understanding of what they are doing to address this very serious issue.
Okay.
Yeah.
Thank you, Trish. So just one quick question, first of all, to Alicia. Did you get a response from Heath's original question?
I'm still working out the process, but
Okay.
it's behind the scenes, yes.
Okay, so again, because we could debate this all afternoon. Okay,
So the committee could send a request to Legislative Management Committee asking to consider a letter to the, sorry, I'm reading it as it comes in. Requesting a special report to be directed. So essentially, yes, we could ask for a report to be conducted on, but the request should be LMC specific, so we should.
okay. Does anyone want to comment from this new information? Trish?
Yeah, so I mean, again, I'm not opposed to this idea at all. I think a report could be very valuable. I'm not sure that we need to wait for the Child and Youth Advocate to complete a report, which, that request is quite vague in and of itself, and it's hard to say how long that might take. Heath, you sort of mentioned looking at all of the schools across the island, which I believe would be a significant undertaking and important and valuable. And also, in the meantime, we could still have the Child and Youth Advocate in to talk about, as you said, there was so many valuable things we heard in the media already. I would like to be able to engage with the advocate on this issue, and I don't see why we have to wait for a report to do that.
Okay.
Could be both, again.
Heath?
I guess, his response was, I haven't been asked, set me off to say, why hasn't he been asked? So that's why I kind of came with this and saying, okay, well, let's ask him. And how do we ask him? Well, then I find out that this committee can't really enforce that to some extent to ask him. It has to go through a Legislative Management Committee. That's why I said we likely need a motion from this committee to go to Legislative Management Committee to ask them to obtain his services, I guess, or however we want to word that. Is that?
Yeah. I will just say it would be a request, so it would be for LMC to consider and then go from there.
So,
For the report, but
sorry, Heath still has the floor.
So do we need, a motion in that regard? To move that? Okay.
Trish?
So, I mean, again, I have no problem with this, with a report, but we don't know what we're asking for in terms of the context of the report yet. I just wonder if we can't have, wouldn't we invite the child and youth advocate to come and speak to the committee, and then he might be able to give us a better sense of the scope of which, you know, his work would need to engage into, you know, for this type, we're just saying a report broadly on, like, that's not really, it's a good idea, but I think we need to narrow that down a bit, and I think there's no reason why we need to delay in having, we don't need to go through legislative management to invite the child and youth advocate to come and speak to the committee. I think that's step one.
Okay.
Yeah.
I'm not saying that, Trish.
Oh, sorry.
What I'm saying is, let's send a request to Legislative Management Committee to engage the child advocate to overview or see or investigate or whatever, do a study on basically this type of issue in all schools across the province. Because really, I think with his response was, well, no one's asked me, and then the next thing we hear, we have someone else coming out doing a consultation or what have you, and we'll be done within 2 weeks. To me, they're two almost separate issues, and invite them in, do what we do, but I think our responsibility as legislators is to ensure that we use all the tools in our toolbox to overcome any issues that we may have. And I really believe that this is a job that he could likely do that may affect us many years down the road. So that's kind of where I'm at, Trish. It's got nothing to do with, it's more so of enacting the child advocate to do what, basically what he said he would do. And I don't think we need to tell him what to look for, because based on his interview, he's very in-depth into this situation.
Trish.
So just to pick up on something that Heath just said, this is a separate issue, and I totally agree. So can we put just a pin in this request for a minute of the report and go back to the original request in the letter, which would include having the child and youth advocate come and present with something that we talked about here.
Okay.
And I'm not saying this is a bad idea. It's a good idea. Just pin this because it's different. It's a different idea than what we're asking for here. Is that fair? And we can just come back to it in a minute. Okay.
Okay, so that being said, as I have stated before, that we can go back and forth on this all day. So the original letter is asking for a urgent briefing, or priority briefing rather, from the public schools branch, as well as some other. So with regards to scheduling, does the committee want to at least send an invitation out to the public schools branch? Again, as Trish had mentioned, we don't know if they're going to say, yes, we can make the presentation, or whether they can say, we can't make the presentation. And the same as to the child and youth advocate, because he might say, I don't have time at the present moment, but I would be able to at a later date. So my question to the committee is kind of the gist of the letter. Do we want to at least send out a formal invitation? And I'm just asking the committee that. Is anyone fair to comment on that?
Sorry, what's that? So this is just to request the public schools?
Just a request, but does the request have to be, again, going back to, does it have to be in-person presentation, or could it be a written? Corey first.
I think in person is fine.
Okay.
My only suggestion would be, out of the 4 bullet points, I'm fine with the 3, not the first one, but the other 3. I think those are all certainly fair. The first one I still have a bit of concern with, but I'm certainly fine to have the public schools branch in to discuss those other 3 bullet points, but.
Okay.
But it's up to the committee.
Yep.
So.
Any comments to that? Steve?
The first bullet point is really just an overview of the incident, and it's just an opportunity for them to tell their side of the story, how it happened, what exactly happened from their perspective. So it's just an opportunity to give an overview of what they know happened and what the response was to it. So it's not getting into the nitty-gritty of the investigation. We're not trying to do our own investigation here. We're just asking them what the investigation will be, when it'll be, who's doing it, those kinds of things about the investigation, not our own investigation. So,
and that was the only thing I was concerned, perhaps.
Okay,
it
thank
might
you.
turn into, is that it would be getting right down to what, when we're talking about the age of these children and whatnot, and kind of what Gord said. So that was kind of my only concern around that. But I think overall, I don't have an issue with.
Okay, and just to follow up on that, what you had said is, that is covered in bullet point 3, right? Information relating to the investigation of the incidents of conduct, including who will be responsible for conducting, et cetera, et cetera. So my question back to the committee is,
Let's
send them a letter, and
Including all of the points listed in the letter, in this original ask.
do we have debate on Corey's point to not have the first bullet point?
I will just say, thank you.
Yeah, Trish?
I respect the ability of the public schools branch to engage in this discussion in an appropriate manner. They are experts in working with children, and they will know what is that they, is confidential and what would be identifying. And we're not asking for them to share information that would identify specific students. However, an overview of what happened, which it does say just an overview of the incidents, I think is perfectly appropriate, considering this is the incident. What happened here is what triggered this, to be in the spotlight, and something that we do need to look at. So I think it's important we understand what happened, and can move on, move from there, from what they know so far. Of course, if we knew everything that happened, there wouldn't need to be an investigation, so there's certainly a lot that needs to be learned still. So the overview is simply, what do you know so far? What happened? I think that's a completely fair question, and it would be difficult to have a conversation without an overview.
Okay. All right, so I'm not hearing too much dissension for these requests to go out to the public schools branch as well as the child and youth advocate. And did we have a consensus on the latter part of sending, which specifically Heath had brought up, going to the child and youth advocate, or are we fine with what is included in this letter?
Can we just, that's still separate. I like Heath's ideas. There's some interesting stuff there, but that's separate from this.
Correct.
Yeah, so just hold on to that for a second.
Okay.
Let's get through this first.
Okay, so, sorry, Stephen?
Well, there's another paragraph here that talks about welcoming presentations from community advocates, including representatives from Pride PEI and Peers Alliance, the Child and Youth Advocate, students and parents, and any other relevant witnesses. So, we cover all that in the latter part of this letter as well, reaching out to the Child and Youth Advocate to submit anything that they might want to, but perhaps we have to go through some sort of due process with the LMC committee there. I guess what I would like to bring up is that maybe these can all be written submissions, not only from the Child and Youth Advocate that we would reach out to, but the other people listed here, students and parents, Peers Alliance, if they wanted to give us as much information as they like.
I think that is a good idea, but I will leave it up to the committee. Okay, perfect. Because one thing too is with scheduling, we might be tight for the month of June, which we will get to on our next point. Okay, so we are good with the letters being sent to both. Thank you, clerk. All right, now back to Heath's point with regards to the Child and Youth Advocate and reaching out.
I'm sorry, I just wanted to clarify. As far as reaching out to students and parents, is that in the form of public submissions, such as like a feedback form, things like that?
If that's all right with the committee? Yeah, that's perfect.
Just a question.
Gord?
In those submissions, what happens if we get, those won't be, are we going to determine at that time if they're going to be public right away? What happens if there's personal information in those submissions about an incident?
That's a good question.
We can specify in the request for, if you want to remain anonymous, that we don't have to post names.
Gord?
I'm just thinking about in there, if we're, I would like some assistance with, I don't want to be releasing public names of any kids, and if we're talking about the actual incident, that's what I'm worried about at this time.
Very good point. There is a way to do that?
Yes, submissions come in through, and then they usually have been posted on the website, but as I said, if they say they don't want their name included or want the whole submission could be just for committee consideration, I think.
Trish first, sorry, and then Heath.
No, I think Gord's concern is if someone submits something that has a child's name in it or someone, that information shouldn't be shared. And I do think that's a fair point. Is there a process where we can ensure that submissions are, there's no identifying information within them? Not of the person who submitted it, but yeah.
Yes, we can have either myself or other staff read through them first to determine that there's no names. Yeah.
Okay. Heath?
I had the same issues, Trish, so, and Gord. Yeah.
Okay. Okay, perfect. So now we're good on that. Perfect. Now back to Heath, with the Child and Youth Advocate. I'm getting there.
So I guess I'll make a motion.
Okay.
Our committee send a request to Legislative Management Committee asking them to consider asking the Child and Youth Advocate to prepare a special report for our committee on inclusion in our school system, not specific to just one school, I guess, or however we word that last.
You got that? Perfect. All right, so we will open up Heath's motion up to debate.
So thank you, Heath. So on that motion, I think inclusion is quite, that's quite broad. Yeah, so I don't know, I would be more comfortable with the actual, the language that is of concern here, which would be, homophobia, transphobia, and bullying. We label that because that is the concern here, and having a report on those issues in our school, I think. So I would take out inclusion and put homophobia, transphobia, and bullying.
So first of all, back to original motion. Gord.
I think if we're going to have to look at that, look at our wording for sure. I would like to see diversity in there. I think diversity covers it or is looking at that issue. So you could look at the word diversity. If we're okay with the motion, then we can look at the wording of it. But I think this is a bigger issue in PEI, and we need to look at it from a grander scale. So I think this is a good motion. So we'll just focus on maybe the wording of it and
Okay.
that.
Trish.
Just a thought here. I wonder if it might be most appropriate to, because I think this is a good idea. This is a sort of a longer term thing that's going to take a little while for the Child and Youth Advocate to do. If it wouldn't be appropriate, honestly, to ask the Child and Youth Advocate about this, say this our intention, we would like to have a report that looks at issues such as homophobia, transphobia. You mentioned diversity. You probably have some specific issues that we should be looking at as well. And what is the best way for us to put that request to legislative management? Because I feel like we're going to be asking for something that is not going to be what we're actually, or what the Child and Youth Advocate would recommend we should be focused on, or how, I'm just.
But
Use the word discrimination.
yeah. So are we getting too deep into something because this is a motion that is being debated right now to pass to ledge management? Do you know what I mean? Like with regards to the wording, I completely understand. And again, it's just a question out to the committee.
We can't request something we can't put a request for it to ledge management if we don't know what we're asking
Specifically
for.
asking for.
It's annoying to talk about words for sure, but it's important.
Yeah, I completely agree.
Yeah.
Okay.
So just add, if we wanted to include any other wording, it would be an amendment to the current motion.
Right. Thank you.
So, that being said, is there any more debate on Heath's specific motion? So Heath, would you want to withdraw the motion to reword? Am I correct in saying that?
Go ahead.
I think the word inclusion covers, yes, it's broad in the sense, but I think, Trish, the child advocate will likely take that, and if there's pressure points within the system, if it's homophobia, for example, or if it's a source of racism, it should all be, I know we're dealing with a specific, but to me, if we're looking at this as long-term and a broader study across all schools, we're already answering the bell on your letter in regards to that and being very specific. to me, bringing in the child advocate is much more than what your letter is, although it's included in that letter. Do you understand kind of where I'm coming from? I think we have an opportunity here to kind of take a look at, you know, if it's racism, if it's whatever. I think there's a big opportunity that this may have opened up to some extent, a very negative opportunity, but it's an opportunity to maybe for this committee to kind of take a lead and say, you know what, yes, this is an issue and this has been an issue last week, but your letter and our structure on how we're responding to that, I think will answer a lot of those questions. And the child advocate coming in will answer some of those questions. And if he deems it at that time to go in a different direction with it, then he's the professional one. Because otherwise, we better ensure that we list every situation that we need to, based on if you're just dealing with the actions that happened at East Wilshire School.
Trish.
So yeah, no, I hear what you're saying, Heath. I do think that the word inclusion is the wrong word either way, because inclusion to me is an important topic, but this was not about inclusion. This was about, this is about hateful incidents. This is about discrimination. This is about bullying, and there are many ways that can present itself, certainly, absolutely. But bullying and harassment and discrimination and inclusion, I don't think inclusion is going to capture, just doesn't capture what we're looking at. So I would like to amend that motion to remove the word inclusion, and I mean, I'm open to other broad language, but bullying, harassment, and discrimination, perhaps. If you want to go with general terms, we could go with those. Inclusion is something a little bit different, I think, than hateful action that we saw.
Gord.
You get discriminated against based on gender, sex, color, ethnicity. So that might be discriminated against based on the following, and then that's how we list them. So we want to know those things. So I think that would be my view.
Okay, so back to the amended motion. Is that where I'm at right now? Okay.
And, sorry, I got bullying, harassment, and what was the final? And
Discrimination.
Heath, this is still in the amended
So there's a motion on the
motion.
floor though first, so either
I amended your motion.
So with the motion,
we didn't approve my motion,
You can't approve a motion.
and then you have to come back and amend it.
No.
hold on one second. I'm going to get clarification from the clerk. So,
Opinion, don't we?
so Heath's motion was originally on the floor for debate. Trish proposed an amendment to the motion. That's where I'm just trying to find out where I should be as, are we still talking about the amendment before, or do we have to close debate on the original motion?
we can deal with the amendment and then.
Okay, perfect. So the amendment, Heath, I don't know if you wanted to speak to that now. The amendment is,
Gord had some wording there. It's your amendment, so I have no idea,
okay.
because I don't want to leave
So
anything out.
Ken,
I'll pull back my amendment for a minute here to hear Gord's language, because he's open to
So
that.
I'd say you've been discriminated against based on gender, sex, color, ethnicity, religion. Like those are the broader things. So I think if we add that, but I'm the only reason I'm hesitant to bring it forward is I know I'll be missing maybe one of them. So that's what I would say, discriminated against based on gender, sex, color, ethnicity.
So,
okay. So Trish?
so I thank you for that, Gord. I hear the concern that we're going to miss something, and I think, I appreciate that concern. I think if this is the, agreed upon path that we want to make it more general, I'm only suggesting inclusion is not the right word. The words are discrimination, bullying, harassment. That's general, and it can cover all of those things. And if that's the way we want to go, to have the child and youth advocate decide, what that looks like next, I mean, at this stage, if we want to send out that request, I'm okay with it, but inclusion is often used in other contexts that I don't think captures the intention of what we're trying to actually have them look at, and I think that's very important, so.
Okay. Heath?
I just want to read inclusion. Inclusion is seen as a universal human right. The aim of inclusion is to embrace all people irrespective of race, gender, disability, medical, or other need. It is about giving equal access and opportunities and getting rid of discrimination and intolerance. Tricia,
So,
Sorry,
I want
Trish.
to put that into words.
Steven?
I was just going to say that, I mean, PEI doesn't have any anti-bullying legislation as yet, but in other provinces, all of these topics that we're talking about come under just the general term bullying itself. You can be bullied for any number of reasons, but bullying, I think, is at the heart of what we're talking about here and trying to deal with the systemic issue that might be in our education system and ways we might be improving that. So is bullying just the word we need?
So, do we want to hear the amendment with the word bullying? Just to hear it?
An amendment to the amendment? I did have,
This is the original amendment, though, so would it have to be amended yet again?
yes, an amendment to the amendment.
Gord?
I'd like to just state, I just found it off the PEI Human Rights. So discrimination against age, color, creed, disability, ethnicity, or national origin, family status, gender expression, gender identity, marital status, political belief, race, religion, sex, sexual orientation.
There's the list.
good.
Good job, Gord.
Perfect. So we do have to vote on the amendment with the inclusion of the wording that Gord provided, correct?
His would be an amendment to the amendment.
Okay, so I'll just pull my amendment.
Okay.
Take it off the
Perfect.
table.
Thank you.
Go ahead, Gordon.
So,
The motion, I'd like to make an amendment to include.
but you're not making a motion, you're making an amendment because Heath's.
Amendment to the motion, yes.
Yeah.
So discrimination based on age, color, creed, disability, ethnic or national origin, family status, gender expression, gender identity, marital status, political belief, race, religion, sex, sexual orientation.
Okay. Trish?
That is a very good list. I really like how you looked that up, Gord. That was helpful. I am going to amend the amendment very, very small, very small. Before discrimination, it should say from bullying, harassment, and discrimination, because those are active, and then that list, and then we're good, and I'm comfortable with that.
So debate on the amendment is good. So I ask for a vote for the amendment, correct?
Amendment to the amendment.
So all those in favor of the amendment to the amendment, say aye.
Aye.
All those opposed, say nay. Okay, so the amendment is passed. And so what,
You still have the motion, I believe, that the original,
so now we go back to Heath's original motion
as
as amended.
Yeah.
Perfect. Okay, so keep me on track here, please, clerk. We
As long
are,
as everyone's okay with bullying, harassment, and discrimination, followed by
Followed
the
by
list
the
that Gord
Gord's
read,
list.
I think I can form a letter to LMC.
perfect. Okay, so are we fine to move on to the scheduling? Continue on with scheduling? Okay, perfect. So as the clerk will reach out to the groups to try to possibly get in with regards to the letter, we do have the Cooper Institute, which we do have confirmed for the 22nd.
They are willing to come in. I just wanted to hold off to see what the committee's prioritization was like, because I know that it may seem like the calendar isn't as full with a few special committees missing, but there are either committees meetings booked or holds for some meetings pretty well for all of June. And I know that there is a conflict with the 29th at the check-in. Yeah.
Okay. So, so we just need then to know the prioritization if we do hear from the Public Schools branch on the Cooper Institute coming on the 22nd or the Public Schools branch. What is the wish of the committee for priority-wise? Keeping in mind too that we do need to report to the legislature in the fall with regards to the Temporary Foreign Workers Act. Trish?
Yeah, sorry, Chair, and I might have missed this, so they're both important, absolutely. So can we have a meeting at a time beyond our regularly once-a-week schedule?
I'm just looking at the kind of internal calendar right now, and the only
time.
open days are the afternoon tomorrow and the 17th. So I don't know if they'd be willing to come in that fast. But other than that, everything else is held by other committees.
So,
Other
back
than-
to the original question, what is the priority? Like, again, we can have the Cooper Institute present on the 22nd. I guess it's the question to the committee is if the PSB could present before or on that date, would we want to bump the Cooper Institute? Trish?
Can we just do both? Can we stay here longer and they're not the same topic, but they're both important and they're both individual presentations, so.
I don't know, is that possible?
Yeah, it's up to the committee, but I can arrange that, providing that they're available.
So what is the wish of the committee with regards to that?
Stay here longer, as in what do you mean longer? Just longer after, like, now type of thing, into the evening, or?
No, we just had two presentations today, right?
Yeah.
So same idea,
Oh,
just two totally different topics, but that's,
Talking about the morning, I was like, the committee's in the morning, so.
no, I just meant,
So that's all right? That's okay? That's okay? All right. So yeah, that would be okay if possible. And lastly, so the schedule is good, clerk?
yes.
Yeah. Okay.
If I could just clarify, the other groups, that we are okay with sending a request for written submissions from them?
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah. Okay, perfect. So lastly, new business.
Yeah.
Okay.
I had a great conversation with Tammy Ricks from the West Prince Chamber. And I found out that they have recently done a survey of their membership. Them and the Eastern Chamber both did the same survey looking at labor shortages. So I know we just had presentations of labor shortages. I think it would be really interesting to have the East and West Prince Chambers come in and present on the results of this survey and what the labor shortages look like in rural PEI and some suggestions on how we might address that.
Anyone?
I know our schedule's full, but if we can add that at some point down the line.
Yeah.
Like, yeah.
If it's on topic, we talked about that. If it fits into our work plan that we talked about last week, I think, or maybe just a written submission to get some information from them in the beginning with a future meeting, potentially.
That might not be a terrible idea. What's the committee's thoughts on a written submission with potential for a future presentation?
It's good. It sounds like it's with the results of a recent survey. So we
Yeah.
might get what we need from a written submission, we might not.
We might not. Okay. So is that all right, Trish?
Yeah.
Perfect. All right. And is there any other, so we'll send, questions, right?
Sorry, it was just asking them to provide a written submission on the report. Sorry, Trish, that it was.
On the recent survey, yeah, they did a survey of their membership specifically around labor shortages, and I know that's a topic of the committee, so be a different perspective.
I think that's great. Is there any other new business? All right. You do have one other thing or no? Perfect. All right. I'll ask for a motion for adjournment. Gordon McNeely. So this committee is done. Thank you very much.